Pledge of allegiance, 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 pledge of allegiance.
Good job.
And pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
We get it. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And just a reminder that Highland City is committed to civility and respect, and we ask everyone to act and speak accordingly. Hey, Jay and Rob, will you let us know when Kim joins, just so we are aware? And with that, we can open it up for unscheduled public appearances. So we don't have anything on our agenda tonight that is a public hearing. So if you want to talk about e-bikes, ADUs, what else do we surveys, flock cameras, now is your chance. So we'll go ahead and open that up. Anybody would like to comment? Wes Warren, thank you for always doing your part.
You're welcome. Like Mayor said, I'm Wes Warren. I'm a Highland City resident. I am, as you guys know, I ride my bike everywhere, so I thought I'd just stand and comment real quick on the e-bike thing. Mine is a Class 2, and I think I've seen a trend over the last couple of years of some of the lines that divide the classifications blurring a little bit by manufacturers. And I don't know if that has, I think the only time or way that that would come into play is if, based on the different options that council is, or that the staff is recommending, that if it was limited to just Class 1 on trails and parks. Mine Class 2 doesn't go above 20. It has a throttle, which I never use because it gets me to about 17 miles an hour when the pedal assist is so much easier to get up to 20. And it has a speedometer, which is usually just for Class 3, but mine has one because it's fun to know how fast you're going. Yeah, I think out of the options, I think keeping Class 1 and 2 on the trails is very reasonable, and then all of the state's recommendations for safety, I think, is really good also. I watched a video, and Dr. Smith can probably speak to this, of I don't know if it was an attending nurse or a doctor, an ER doctor, but it used to be that trampolines were the #1 summer cause for kids coming in, and she said now it for her in her area, it's been e-bikes, e-scooters, e-devices that has surpassed trampolines as the reason why kids are coming in, and they're so much more dangerous. So I like the rules that the state has in place for those. My kids never leave on their scooters unless they have a helmet. I never ride without a helmet. So I like all that. As far as flock cameras go, I hate them for a lot of reasons, and I have 50 seconds left, so I won't get into them. But they are a serious privacy concern where I'm not going to deny the benefits of having flock cameras in cities, but I feel like the negatives to us and our liberties far, far, far dwarfs any positives. But that's my 2 cents, 4 cents, I think, the two topics. So thank you, Council and Mayor.
Thank you, Wes. Are you going to stick around for the work session? Okay, please do. Anybody else? Yeah, please, come on up.
Thank you.
Hi, welcome.
Welcome. My name is Frank Tuciasena. I'm a resident of Highland, and I'm here to speak about Highland Glen Park. I walk the park every morning, and not happy that my wife and I have to pick up and clean up all the time. So my question to you is that we live in the most affluent city in all of Utah, and we need to figure out a way to beautify, renovate, and maintain our park, and certainly leave the door open to everyone who wants to come and visit, but make them responsible to take care of this, what I consider the gem of Highland. My kids, my son, we built the volleyball court there with Scott, with the Highland Foundation. I brought in the Pro Beach Volleyball Tour to Salt Lake City. That sand that's in there is still the same sand and nice and soft. Certainly, you got to get with the Parks Department and fix the poles. But anyways, I came here today. There's a young man down there named Chris, who's not even, I found out, he lives in American Fork.
Christopher, yeah,
Yeah, amazing.
he is great.
So what I'd like to do is propose to the group here that you have a lot of things to do. I want to offer my time and my resources to put together a comprehensive plan to take care of the park. I'm willing to go out and raise resources, commit my own resources. I'm in the events business. Happy to have a couple of events during the year. You know, you can tell I'm Polynesian. We can have an annual Highland Park Glen Luau, and all the money we raise will stay for the park. But certainly, signs, trash cans, a lot of things that can be done, but it can't keep going on the way it is. It's deteriorating. There's more and more trash, and when people come in there, they're assuming that I can just do what I want to do. And the police have been great, but we need to, again, get some signs out there and get better maintenance, but really inform the people who are coming to Highland to use this gem of a park that they need to be responsible. And unless we do something, you know, a concerted effort with everybody, and what I'm here to ask you is the city council, I don't want to add another thing to your plate. I just want you to support an effort that we can gather together on a volunteer basis to take care of the park, raise the money needed for it, and be able to do something to make a difference. Because this morning, I have a picture, I should have brought it for you. One of the docks was just trashed. And it's the same way every day, and it's going into the water. It's just terrible. And we shouldn't have that. And I would love to see the American flag constantly flying over that Highland Glen Park every single day. So I'm here to plead with you to consider getting a group together with some residents, with the Public Works. I certainly don't want to put more on their plate, and I'm here to offer my service to help do something to take care of our park in Highland. That's it.
Thank you so much. And would you be okay, I've got your comment card here, if one of us contacts you and we can
Please.
set something up?
I would love to.
Perfect.
Thanks.
We'll get it scheduled. Thank you so much. Anybody else? If we don't have any other comments, we will go ahead and move to our Highland Fling preview and the final plans. Welcome, Brooke.
I do have some slides in there. Okay, so to start with, this is our Saturday site map. So our biggest day of fling, our full day. Oh, I put a key in there, but I guess after this was admitted, the key would help. But you can see kind of the activities that we have placed about. We are all sold out on our vendors, which are those little brick-looking things. That's like the red. And then we are also sold out on our non-food vendors as well. We have America 250 out there in the field right by the kids zone that's a great and nice addition to our fling this year. But you can go to the next slide. We also have our sponsors that a lot of them were able to be in the magazine. Some of them came to us just last week. And so those are our in-kind donors right there. They've donated prizes for different events. Crest Club has donated all of the pies for our pie eating contest, and we're just grateful for their donations that make this event possible. And
Can you
yes.
tell me how much, do you know what Central Bank donated, how much?
Yes, they are our diamond sponsor, and they donated $4,000.
$4,000, and that gets them the full page and
It used to, but we did switch it up this year to where there was an even, because usually we used to call that like the title ship sponsor,
Yes.
but now the 4,000 became the diamond sponsors. So we had offered them a higher donation for or offered the title ship sponsor, but they would have to pay more for it. And we told them the benefits, but they chose the 4,000.
Well, I know Alta Bank wants to step up next
Yes.
year, so
I heard.
hopefully we'll get a little competition going, say who wants to be number one.
I heard that they start giving out donations in November, so we're going to contact them in October.
That's right. That's perfect.
So signage and branding, thanks to Kelly Campbell, Ron's wife, helped us out with the branding for the fling this year. As you know, we kind of switched it up, so we're going to become more recognizable. So this is kind of what you're going to see at the event. There's our T-shirts right there that are especially going to go to the 5K runners, and we're going to give them out as prizes throughout the event. We just really want to establish the brand of the red, white, and blue Americana. That on the right side is going to be the schedule that you're going to see all over the event. It's going to be humongous. We're going to have it Thursday through Saturday so that people know what's going on. They're very informed and want to come back the next day. And the emergency and contingency plan is, I would say finished. It's finished from my eyes. I did print off some copies if anybody wants one over on this table. And I would love any feedback of because this is my first time with the Highland Fling. If y'all want to give me any feedback or just keep one so that you're informed, I did send an email out yesterday to Sergeant Wagstaff, Chief Patton, and Deputy Chief Beck to try and coordinate the plan so that it's not just written, but it's something that we actually are coordinated on and can actually go in full force if we need to do that, which always hoping we won't, but yeah. And then nearly finished here. We have had our Highland Fling meetings. We're gonna have our last meeting this upcoming Monday from 5 to 6 p.m. right in the back meeting room here. And anybody is welcome to come and join us for this last meeting, just kind of to see what we're doing there. But we've been meeting every Monday this month and have been meeting every month since January. And we've just had such an amazing time with this committee. And America 250, I'm just going to put a coin in for them because they're part of our event. And so for the America 250 celebration, which has been really, really amazing to put together with our committee, we have a 15-minute patriotic music and speech vignette that's part of the opening ceremonies after the mayor's welcome. And we have 8 U.S. colonial booths, thanks to Liz Rice for getting that together, and a Passport to America activity that's based on those and other events at Highland Fling, like the DUP Coppins, the Historical Society, and visiting that museum to kind of put them all together where we have our own history, but it's also getting people across the street to a lesser attended event in previous years. And then, of course, our signing of the Declaration of Independence, both on stage through a reenactment with John Adams, and also everyone at the event is invited to sign their own Declaration of Independence at one of the booths.
One quick thing about the committee meeting on Monday. Kim is the council representative, and so she is generally there. I volunteered to work with the parade, and so I am generally there. If any other council member is interested in attending, it's probably good to let Stephanie know so that we can notice it.
Yes, perfect. And then last thing, I do need to get the polos ordered for each of the council members. I have actually included Jay and Aaron on that as well, and I have made a form for sizing. So if you haven't already, I would love for that to be filled out because we'd like to go and order them tomorrow. And it's just one question, so it's
The form doesn't let you put your name, is that okay? It says it's anonymous.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's
Okay.
anonymous. It's anonymous. I believe it is. I have,
How can it be anonymous if we're getting sizes?
I don't know. That's why
I wondered if it tracked on the back end, since it was, because you emailed out to certain people, so you know who
You know,
they're
I
who's
think it
responding
does.
with which shirt size.
It tracks on the back end. I went to save it, and because I wasn't logged in, I couldn't save it, but it
Got
knew
you.
who I was, so.
So Brooke will know on the back end, even though she hasn't
Okay.
asked your names.
Okay,
Perfect.
sorry.
No, all good.
Okay, and then I also have a form that I made for participation from council members, just to make sure that we have representatives for each of the events. Some of them are more drop-in, like the pickleball tournament is going all day, so I put like a 3-hour time slot here, but of course, it's just drop-in, just to see how the event is going, just to represent. I did do it on Sign Up Genius, and I made it really quickly. I did go over it, but Sign Up Genius is really hard to work with. So hopefully it's cohesive. If you have any questions, you can always reach out. I'm always checking my email. A text is nice. So that is all. Thank you.
You have done a really great job. The magazine looks fantastic. Kelly Campbell has been great. I'm super excited about the America 250 thing, but
Yeah.
just really great job. The energy at the meeting yesterday was fantastic, so thank you, and thanks to Jay, I know has worked on it a lot as well.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions about the fling?
I think she has worked really hard too, and so has Emma, and I appreciate, matter of fact, Doug's worked super hard. Kurt's been, our committee of 5, we call them the committee of, that's right, they were a committee of 5. But, we have a printing press coming that they will actually print out it's a replica of the printing press that did the broadsides after the signing of the Declaration, so he'll do that. We have some things from the Mayflower, a pilgrim, sailor, rope maker, basket maker, fiber arts, spinning and weaving, and the potter, and I'm just waiting on the Cooper, the chocolate maker, and the violin maker. So, and all went out to sea. So anyway, but that's what we're waiting for. So we think it'll be a little colonial village is what we're doing.
Yeah. And you cannot miss the presentation. If Kurt Ostler were here, he could tell you all about it and would be so excited to do so. But he really does. He has pulled together some amazing stuff. And the Highland Choral Choir is going to be part of it as well. So we're proud of them.
I just want to add that the car show will have awards given out, and Chief Patton and Chief William, there is a Fire Chief's Award, and you weren't there last time, and I did yours. I made a selection for you, but if you're there, it would be better. Both of you have a specific award, Police Chief's Award, car, #1 car for the show.
I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, Chiefs, but I heard there was a competition between the two of you in the fishing pond on Saturday? Okay, so that was correct. Okay. That'll be so fun. He doesn't think it's funny. No, he doesn't think I'm funny at all. I think watching them in the fishing pond would be funny. I'm excited about that, by the way.
Just think the fishing pond's better than the horses.
As long as I'm less wet than the dunk tank, then we might be able
Oh, you were a very good sport. All right, off the hook. Anybody else, questions or comments about the fling? No? Thank you. Thank you. Really well done. It's been fun to work with you. Okay, we have one action item tonight. This is action item 3A, and this is a code update from Rob.
Thank you, Mayor. We didn't give you much advance notice of this. This is something that we kind of got a couple questions about over the last month and decided it was pretty straightforward. So we would just bring it to the council for your opinion. So, some of you may remember a couple years ago we talked about right-of-way permits. We amended the city's code to kind of clean up some of the provisions, provide clearer standards and processes. One of the big things we addressed was making sure that we require right-of-way permits for all work in the right-of-way, not just cutting the asphalt, but if you're doing a curb cut or something like that, you should come to the city so that we know what you're doing and we can make sure you're doing it appropriately and with city standards. As part of that, we also updated the fees we charged, and one of those, not quite a fee, it's a security. We charge $2,500 as a cash bond, and we hold that for 1 year after the work is done to make sure nothing falls apart. And this has been working pretty well. We've used our new online platform for it. We've gotten a lot of reviews. But we've also had several residents, as they come in to do curb cuts, that have essentially asked, why do I need the city to hold on to $2,500 when all I've done is cut a curb and that's it? I haven't cut the asphalt. I don't have to do any major road repairs. And as we looked at this as staff, we decided that was a very good point. And so the proposed amendments here are just to clarify some language throughout. But the primary change is to that for those non-excavation permits where they're not cutting the road surface, that we don't have to hold that bond for a whole year. And this will mostly benefit residents. It'll help some, like telecom companies who do work that like are in the park strip, if we're replacing something there. But most of these are for residents cutting our curbs. And so that way we will collect the $2,500, but as soon as they're done, we'll go out and inspect it, see that everything is fine, and then return the money to them. So it's, a couple of weeks to a month, not a year. We also clarified some of the enforcement language so that we gave ourselves some more options and made sure that if something went wrong, the city wasn't going to be liable for it. We can hold up other permits from the same contractor to the same owner, clarified some of the notice procedures that were a little bit out of date. And so those are kind of those are the changes. As we reviewed this, we believe that allowing that cash security to not be held for a year will help encourage people to apply for that. We don't want to make it hard for residents to get these permits because it's better for both the residents and the city if we're on the same page regarding this. And the more cost we impose on the residents, the more we disincentivize them from talking to the city about it. We don't see a significant increase in risk to this, so we recommend adoption of these amendments. Of course, the council can always make any changes that you desire. This is a legislative item. We're also reviewing the security amounts based on the impacts to the road. Currently, it's $2,500. We'll probably leave that same for these, non-excavation, but for the excavations where they're actually cutting the road and having to do asphalt patches, $2,500 may not actually cover the city's risk if we have to go in and patch it ourselves. So we may come back in the future to adjust that a little bit. We're looking at that right now. So with that, that concludes my presentation.
Perfect, thank you. Councilmember Smith, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I always like just to kind of define some terms and different things. By right-of-way, do you mean any public thoroughfare or roadway?
Yes, so any road, it doesn't necessarily involve trails or things of that nature, but from back of sidewalk to back of sidewalk is your standard right-of-way. So sidewalk, park strip, curb, street, curb, park strip, sidewalk.
So that's all part of the right-of-way, which is bigger than the road.
Correct.
That's what you're saying, okay.
So that's why it applies to someone doing a driveway, because they have to cross over the sidewalk, and then they have to cut the curb to make it so they can drive up over it. We ask them to talk to us so our streets guys can go out and make sure everything is fine there. So it's technically the right-of-way, but it's not the street itself.
So just walk me through this. You explained everything. So I'm a resident of Highland, and I'm building a new home, basically on my lot that I've owned for a long time, but I need to cut a driveway in. So what's the process?
So if it's with a new home build, we don't require a separate permit. We handle this with the building permit because they take out a $4,000 bond if you're building a home.
Okay.
But let's say you have a home, but you're building a new garage, that's it, or you want to widen it because you've added a new driveway off to the side. Usually it'll come in, call in to Gretchen, who's our public works assistant, and they'll say, I'm adding a driveway, what do I do? And then she'll walk them through it. There's an online application where you just say, here's the address, here's where I'm doing work, here's the type of work I'm doing, and if it's in the road, we'll ask for a traffic control plan. Most of these types of things for residents don't require that. And then they hit submit, it comes in, it gets reviewed by our engineers and our public works staff, our streets and our team. For a driveway connection, one of our streets guys will actually go out and meet with the resident on site. They want to check to make sure that there's not a storm drain that they'll be driving over. That's usually the biggest concern, or a hydrant or something. And they'll mark out the length and usually even paint it on, say, okay, from here to here, you're good. Talk with the resident, make sure everyone's on board. And then The resident goes ahead and does the work, calls back into Public Works, says, I'm all done. Streets guys go back out, look at it, make sure everything was done properly, there's no damage to sidewalks or any of the road, and say, great, you're done. And with this change, we'll say, and we'll give you back your $2,500 now.
So if you cut a curb, don't you cut it and have to redo the curb and gutter there?
You can do it without needing significant repair if you do it properly. You can just kind of angle the curb down and cut it across.
Okay.
Now, there's a chance that it could end up damaged, and that's why we're still asking for that $2,500 bond. It may be that they'll have to actually replace a part of the curb as part of it. If it got damaged by their work, they went too far, or it somehow cracked and doesn't work anymore, we'll say, you got to replace that with this as well. Have your driveway guy, pour a new curb to our standards.
And the 2,500 usually covers that?
Yes.
without a
I mean,
lot of problem.
we've not had a problem with having them fix these issues. Usually we go out and we tell them, get this fixed while your guys out there, and we'll give you your money back. So
what if they're like a corner lot and the curb cut's too close to the corner? I mean, how do you deal with that? I'm sorry I'm asking these questions.
No, these are great
I'm just
questions.
asking, if I'm a citizen, what do I need to do?
So part of when the streets crew goes out to talk with them is trying to make sure we put the driveway in the right location. And so we have some standards where, I believe it is 30 feet from the intersection the driveway is supposed to be. Right. So our streets guys will go out and help the resident understand where they can do it. We also limit it to 50 feet of frontage, or 50 feet of driveway that you can have on one frontage. If you have a corner lot, you can have a second driveway, but it's limited to 15 feet. So our guys will actually go out and measure it out to make sure it's not, we don't want the entire thing to be a driveway.
So this is probably a question as well for the fire chief, but how close can you cut that driveway to a fire hydrant?
Typically 3 feet. You don't want anything closer than 3 feet to a hydrant. 3 feet.
Okay.
So that applies both to, driveways and things, but also trees and vegetation. We don't want anything within 3 feet of a hydrant.
Okay. Very good.
Great
That
questions.
answers my questions.
Perfect. Councilmember Courtney.
I particularly like the changes. There were a couple of new things added in that I thought were really good, and you addressed them in the bullet points. Just to confirm that if someone is doing work and their permit doesn't require excavation, but actually damage something that will require excavation to repair, we can still keep the warranty security for the full year as if they had started.
Yes, we'd essentially convert it to an excavation. Say they somehow damage the curb significantly enough, they have to cut out a part of the road. It's possible something like that could happen. We'd want to make sure it holds up for at least a year afterwards.
Okay, great, thanks. That's all I've got.
Okay, Councilmember Campbell.
It looks fantastic. I'm just curious why you changed the term bond to security. They're both nouns, but security has got so many other definitions.
It's a great question, and that bond also has several different definitions, and most of the time we use it colloquially to mean a security that you give for something.
Yeah.
But in kind of the bond world, there's there's bonds that are loans, and there's bonds that are surety bonds, which are insurance type things. And I don't want someone to say, oh, you say we can give you a bond, so I'm going to give you this insurance policy, or try to use my homeowner's insurance to write an addendum to it that covers this. We're trying to say it's not a bond, it's a security, and then we say it in a different place, and by that we mean cash deposit. You give us $2,500 that sits in the city's bank.
Fantastic. Thank you. I don't have any
Great
other
question.
questions.
Councilmember Rice, questions?
So I've actually had 2 neighbors in my neighborhood, and I'm about to replace my driveway because it's 30 years old. So do we still expect that $2,500 bond, even though it's replacement? I mean, you know me, I'm a stickler. I would make them, if they damaged the sidewalk, I would make them replace it. But when you replace, that's going to be kind of hard. I don't know if they're going to take out the sidewalk and replace it, but does the city expect that to come as well, just replacing it? And we're not taking out gutter, but we're expanding the driveway a tad, like a tad.
So if you're just doing work back of sidewalk, so it's only on basically your property, we don't need to see that. You're welcome to hardscape that in, put the driveway in, replace it, whatever.
Okay.
If you end up doing anything, forward of the sidewalk, so you're replacing parts of the sidewalk itself,
Okay.
you're redoing maybe your driveway apron and touching the curb as
Okay.
part of that, we would like to get a right-of-way permit beforehand, just so we know what's
have it
going
looked
on.
at. So, so this is, I mean, we're talking driveways here, but, and I sent this to Aaron a while back, but somebody put a pool in and when the trucks backed over the sidewalk, and they never made them replace it. I'm assuming there was a bond set forth for the pool, but I think it's on the list to be replaced at the city's cost.
So, great question on that. We do require securities or bonds with building permits. So it's $4,000 if you're doing a new build, so, you just have a lot and you're building up on top of it. If you have an existing home, you're adding a detached garage or a pool or something, it's $2,500. That's where we got those two numbers. or
Okay.
the same number for this as well. It might have been that they did a pool and it didn't end up finaling, so they haven't come out for their final inspection, because our building inspectors know to go out and check sidewalks. That's one of their checkoff lists when they go to final
Okay.
out any project, and then we won't release that. So either that was from a long time ago, we didn't have a bond, or they've never finaled, and we're still working on catching up on those old permits.
Okay. No, I think that was it. I just, I honestly had no idea that if I even replaced my driveway that I would have to come and get one, so this is good. And now I can answer, I've had quite a few questions in my neighborhood on that, so thank you.
And you're not alone. Many of our residents don't know that, so we want to let them know it and also try to make it as easy as possible to go through this process.
Okay, thank you. I think we also have Councilwoman Rodella on the phone. Did you have any questions about this one? I'm going to assume that's a no. Let us know and we can come back if we need to.
Crickets.
Yeah, there she is. Yeah, there she is. Yeah, there she is. Yeah, there she is. Yeah.
There she is.
Any questions, Kim? I think we are probably safe to say there are no questions from Kim. So with that, if there aren't any other questions, we can go ahead and take a motion.
I'll do the motion. I move, just a minute, we're waiting for Stephanie. Do we have one right there?
It's there now.
I move the city council adopt the proposed amendments to the municipal code dealing with the right-of-way permit as written.
I'll second it.
And before we vote, Kim, now that you're back in again,
She's in the room.
do you have any?
She didn't.
Okay.
Okay, so that was a motion by Councilmember Rice and a second by Councilmember Smith, and we're ready for a vote.
I got nothing.
Got it.
And that passes 5-0. Moving on to our discussion items. So if it's okay with everybody, we are going to move item 4B in front of 4A so that Chief Beck can get on with his evening. So we can go ahead and do that item now. This is our Community Wildlife Preparedness Plan. Welcome.
This is that. Is that on?
What did I say? Oh, we're not prepared on wildlife.
I've got some deer you get rid of.
Is it on now? Okay. Just kind of want to give you a little bit of history just about the Community Wildfire Preparedness Plan and how it ties into the cooperative into the CWS. I'm going to use some acronyms. I'm going to try not to. It's kind of common in the fire world and probably in the police world. So if you have questions as I go along, feel free to stop me, especially with the acronyms. I'll try to stay away from those. But about 2 years ago, we started working on the CWPP and on the revision of it. We've always had an existing one for our community. We've been working on a revision of it. There's a lot more work than I was anticipating. And fortunately, we're able to secure a grant that helped us get a consultant to help us write this plan. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it. It's fairly long, and there's a lot of links that take you to other documents that are long, and so it's a robust plan that I think is going to take really good care of Highland. A little bit of background on what it is. So the CWPP is part of Utah's cooperative wildfire system, and I believe Chief Patton's talked to you guys about that. That's the CWS. That's basically the insurance plan. If we get a large catastrophic fire, that the state will come in and help us manage and pay for that if we're doing our part of the CWS obligations. The idea of CWS is pretty simple. It's basically if we, as a fire department, as a community, work to reduce wildfire risk through planning, prevention, mitigation, preparedness, and response, then they will help us with those catastrophic fires. So basically the CWPP that you've seen and I talked about the first, that's basically the roadmap for doing that, for meeting those CWS obligations. In it, we've identified Highlands wildfire risks. We've been able to prioritize projects that'll make our community safer. And it's really going to strengthen the coordination not only between Highland City and Lone Peak Fire District, but also between our federal partners and our state partners. It also opens us up to grant money, because as you guys know, mitigation is not free. It takes a lot of money to do mitigation. And so there's a lot of money out there that we're hoping to secure grants on to help us meet our project objectives. Another thing, this isn't going to be a plan that just sits on a shelf. This is a working document that we're going to be in every single day to make sure we're meeting the objectives of it. That's really it as far as the CWPP goes and the CWS. Do you guys have any specific questions for me?
Councilmember Courtney, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions about this. Thanks.
Councilmember Campbell?
On the emergency resources and planning, you have an Alpine City emergency preparedness, but you don't have anything for Highland. Do we have a dusty one that's on a shelf somewhere?
Yeah, and I know that Jeff is working on getting that updated. I think Councilmember Rice has seen a copy as well. I'm not sure if I think it's in the circulation stage where we're working on getting our dusty plan undusty.
And I would like to see it here with a link, obviously.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, me too, for sure. Yeah, I think at the time of the revision, I didn't have a good one to link onto there, but I think that's definitely in the works. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Yeah, thanks for catching that.
Councilmember Rice?
I want to thank you for all your hard work. I know I'm putting together, and it's emergency preparedness in general, it's really hard and a lot of work. So thanks. I don't really.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Smith.
So I just always kind of like to walk through these things so I understand. Okay. So you've got this preparedness plan, and we're going to link, we've got Alpines linked in, we're going to have Highlands updated and linked in. So what if we have a big fire up American Fork Canyon and it starts to encroach on Highland? Does this just enable federal funds to come in, state funds, and helps with all the coordination of the communities? 'Cause
Yes.
there was a lot of writing in it, and I was just kind of, I just like to know how it actually works.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of writing. A lot of it's firefighter jargon.
Right.
And to make sense of it, is this CWPP is an obligation to meet in the CWS, and by meeting the CWS, we're going to have that insurance plan with our federal partners and our state partners, that if there's a fire that comes into our community or starts in our community, that the financial obligation and the resources will have those available to us.
Okay. So they basically don't bankrupt the fire department or the city or anything? We
Yes.
have cooperation. Okay, that's what I thought the bottom line was.
Yeah, you're right. You got it.
Okay, very good. Thanks for all your work on it. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And there was a really interesting tabletop exercise that we were part of where they kind of went through different scenarios and what would actually happen. And it was super interesting to just see all the work that goes into having a plan like that, and it was really eye-opening, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We've got kind of a deal with Council Member Rodella. If she has questions, she'll just let staff know. So I'm not ignoring her, but she'll let us know if she has questions. Anything else? No? We really appreciate you coming tonight.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for all your help. I know summer is busy for you guys, so thank you. Okay. Hey, Rob, should we talk about e-bikes?
I would love to.
Perfect, let's do it.
So we've talked about e-bikes a couple of times. I know there's been some emails coming in from residents. We've had Wes talk about his experience with the e-bikes. Our code is out of date and state law has changed. So I will do a kind of an overview of what state law is, where our code is, and then the options before the council, and hopefully get some discussion and a direction on what you'd like to do with this. So e-bikes, any electric bike, they have to have pedals and be operable as a bike without a motor. Some of them have motors that can operate them independently, but this is the catch-all category. Does not include e-motorcycles. So there's discussion of the different classes. We have 3 classes of e-bikes. The first one is the ones that look most like bikes. They are the pedal assist, meaning the electrical motor you can't just turn on a motor, have a throttle, and go. You actually have to be pedaling for the bike to work. The motor will help you and can get you up to 20 miles an hour. That's the state limit. Class 2 keeps that 20-mile-an-hour limit, but it has the motor, it has a throttle. You can essentially operate the bike at a low speed without pedaling on it. Class 3 is like the Class 1 except a higher speed. So it's a pedal assist, but the motor stops at 28 miles an hour. We also have scooters. These are the motor-assisted scooters. These are like the Class 2 bikes where they can be operated either by human power or electric power, but can operate independently. The state also added a new category of thing called a high-power electric device. Basically says anything, including modified bikes or modified scooters, that can go over 20 miles an hour on the motor alone, and then separately regulates e-motorcycles. Those are just treated like motorcycles. So when we're talking about e-bikes and e-scooters, we're talking about things that humans can use on their own. They're not just motorcycles. Under state law, they kind of generally say they're allowed wherever bikes are allowed, with some rules based on age. So under 8, no e-bikes or motor-assisted scooters on a highway. The law is changing a little bit between now and 2027, but it'll mostly just be highway, so including on the road or on sidewalks. Notice when I say sidewalks, it still allows it on trails unless we designate it otherwise, which is kind of the point of this discussion. Between 8 and 16, currently, they just can't operate Class 3s. In the future, they will be able to operate Class 3s, but you either have to be under adult supervision or there's like a new licensing process, a electronic device certificate that the child will have to get. And then over 16, they're allowed kind of anywhere. State law, again, generally allows them anywhere unless cities say otherwise. So our code generally prohibits motor vehicles and motor-driven cycles or similar things in our parks and trails. It doesn't really discuss road or sidewalk usage, and it's now just kind of out of date as, electric devices have been designed and evolved over time and state laws change. We should update our code whichever direction we want to go. And so our options are, what do we want to allow and where do we want to allow them? First, we could regulate sidewalks and roads differently than parks and trails, or treat them all the same, up to the council. And then the second question is, what should we allow? We could say nothing, nothing that has an electric motor at all. Or the next option down is basically, as long as you're pedaling, it's fine and at your low speed. So that's the Class 1. The third option would be Class 1 or 2 e-bikes and the motor-assisted scooters, those that can be operated with or without pedaling or, pushing it yourself as a human, limited to 20 miles an hour. The final one is allow everything except for those high-power electric vehicles, so nothing that can, on its own, have a motor that can go over 20 miles an hour. We looked at other cities and there is no consensus on how these are regulated. Provo requires registration of these things, doesn't allow them on sidewalks or trails. Vineyard has a 50-mile-an-hour limit, allows Class 1 and 2 bikes on trails. American Fork, Saratoga Springs ban Classes 2 and 3, so they only allow Class 1. American Fork says you can't operate them downtown specifically, where there's more people. Saratoga Springs says nothing in lanes or roads, bike lanes or roads. You can't have electronic bikes. Pleasant Grove, they are allowed on sidewalks, but you have to yield to pedestrians. And other cities are currently defaulting to state law, but I'm sure a lot of cities are trying to catch up as well. So staff doesn't have a particular recommendation. Class 3 are the fast bikes, so it seems to make sense. Class 1 is the ones that look most like bikes. You're still pedaling. Class 2 is motor, you can drive it, at the same speed as a Class 1, but you don't have to pedal with it. Ultimately, it's up to the council as what you think is appropriate, and I'm sure Chief William has some insight as well, or may, in what he's seen. But that's all I have, Mayor.
All right, Chief, before we talk about it, do you have any comments?
No, I appreciate the presentation that Rob gave. Are you asking for my opinion?
Yep.
Just what our experience has been. We don't typically have issues with the Class 1 or Class 2 bikes. It's when you find those e-motorcycles or e-bicycles that are operating in excess of 20 miles an hour where we typically find misuse. And when I talk about misuse, it's mostly kids under the age of 18 are the ones that are misusing them. So if we could move in that type of direction that would allow us to help enforce the state law, but also a city ordinance that would kind of give us a little bit of guidance and direction would be helpful. So I don't know if that helps, or I'm happy to answer any questions.
That helps. Councilmember Campbell, we'll start with you.
I like the Class 1 and 2 designation. The reality is that it doesn't go over 20 miles an hour. The irony is that a bicycle, I can have a 10 speed that'll go 30. But I think if we restrict it, when we saw the one city that limited it to 15 miles an hour, I kind of like that. That struck a chord with me, but it's new to me, so I haven't really had a lot of time to think about it. Because of limiting the speed does seem that it would be safer if we allow them on the sidewalks, for example, and on the trails. I like to take my e-bike down to Highland Glen Park, and I have to go on sidewalks and trails to do it. Another example is there's bike lanes, but the bike lane does not go down SR 92 between Alpine and North County Boulevard. So going around those cars is dangerous, and I don't want to be on the road. So I go down the sidewalk. I usually am on the road. But there are times when, like that, when there's cars parked there, and then I'm literally in the same lanes going 15 miles an hour at the most. So I like number 3 here. And then how we talk about allowing them on sidewalks and trails, is that a separate discussion, or?
Yeah, I think they're two different questions that they would like
and
answered.
I would hope that we would allow them. We allow bicycles, right? And an e-bike is a bicycle with a little bit of an assistance. I like, my bike is 500 amps, or watts, excuse me. And with that, there are 1,000 ones that really are the faster ones. So none of these classes have the amperage designation, which surprises me a little bit because that's what controls the speed. But I know mine doesn't go over 20 miles an hour. It's got a speedometer as well, and it doesn't go over 20. So anyway, that's what I think at this point.
Councilmember Rice, what are your thoughts?
So can you go back to the slide where it has what the other cities do, please? So some of our trails connect with some of these cities, correct? So I find it difficult. I mean, honestly, I have lots of friends that do an e-bike. I ride a bike, it's not an e-bike. I can't afford it, but I will tell you that I think it defeats purpose of riding bikes, sort of. But I don't know how we can restrict one or how they can ban one and then they use our trails to come in. I think that's going to be really hard to enforce with the police. And I'm trying to think of it in my mind of how that works. So when they allow one that we don't, and I kind of think we need to coincide a little bit with that. But honestly, I've seen a couple of e-bikes. I've clocked them. I've driven alongside of them, and they're doing 35 miles an hour. And I don't know which class it is. I'm just barely starting to understand that. But at 35 miles an hour, I've seen some really bad accidents, I feel, on the trail, or near accidents too. So I'm not sure I totally have an opinion on this yet. I want to hear what the other council members have to say. The number 3, is it 3? Yeah, e-bike class 3, is that correct? No to that, but I just don't know how that's going to work going from one trail to the next. If they allow it, we don't, or we allow it and they don't. So that's really all I have to say. I've got to listen to the rest of you, and maybe you could come back to me if need be. That's all I really have.
Councilmember Smith?
So I wanted to thank Rob trying to clarify this. One of the problems is I think it's pretty complex. And at the same time, it becomes an enforcement issue. So I'm just going to ask the chief, how are you going to enforce this, whatever we come up with? Are the police going to be patrolling the streets looking for somebody that's going too fast on the trail? Because I think Councilman Campbell said, you know, and Rice basically said, you get people on the Murdoch Canal Trail, they're just on regular bikes, and they're going really fast sometimes. So I don't know how you enforce this. And then I'm going to give a couple examples of my concerns about safety. So how do you enforce it? Do you go up and around, or is it all complaint-driven, or what is it?
So we've talked about this in the past. It does get a little difficult to enforce. And when I say that, I'm talking about, I guess we need to talk about the difference between the e-bikes and the e-motorcycles. It's the e-motorcycles that we have the issues with, and not necessarily the class 3, but the class 3 you can go faster on a class 3. One thing that I would caution or would like us to stay away from would to designate a mile per hour. Let's just stick to the classifications of the e-bikes, and that will suffice. Because if we get into miles an hour, it becomes a bit more of a difficult issue.
It's real nebulous.
When we have trails that connect between the cities, and we have a different law or ordinance, if you will, than our neighboring cities, I just would equate that to, I'll use 6,000 West as an example. 6,000 West is 30 miles an hour in Highland, and when you get into American Fork, it's 25. But it turns into, I think it's 150 West in American Fork. It's just, there's just differences when you cross into different city boundaries, and that would be upon the police department to do that enforcement. It does get difficult to enforce on trails because the only thing that we currently have to access trails are the motorcycles that we have. You know, I've had officers that have approached me about getting e-bikes and pedal bikes. And Erin smiles because she knows where I'm going with this, but that is a change in uniform, and I'm not a fan of shorts. I think they look terrible on police officers, and so I don't allow my officers to wear shorts. I think they look like you look like a postman or a mailman. Not to say that's a bad.
We won't quote you on that
one. It's just a different job, right? And so I really cringe when we start talking about putting officers on pedal bikes and e-bikes because of a uniform thing, and it's just my personal opinion. On trails, we can use the motorcycles to enforce them on trails, but we do have difficulty enforcing these, and just as recently as this last week, we see young people on e-motorcycles, and you go to enforce it or stop them, and they dip into yards, they dip into trails, they dip into back alleys, to where an officer can't get to. And the public safety risk that you're creating by trying to pursue that individual is greater than the rewards of apprehending them. So it's a decision that most officers make not to do that. And so that information gets out, that say, you know, if you run from the officers, they're not going to pursue you. So it does become a difficult thing. This is something that every city in the state, and I would say across the country, is struggling with on how to, not only what to allow, but how to enforce the ordinances that they're creating in the state law. Now, the state law that we just passed this last legislative session has brought a lot more public awareness to what's allowable and what's not. And I think we've seen some compliance, but just a few weeks ago, we had an officer that stopped a young man on an e-bike, and he contacted the parents, and we got nothing but pushback, and I was told that they were going to call you guys and complain about the enforcement that was taken, which is fine. I'm not complaining about that. It's just there's a lot of apathy and a lot of, I just don't, the parents don't, in our experience, don't really care what the ordinance says, so, and what state law says. That if their kids are outside, they're just going to let them do what they want to do. We did have an accident this last weekend with an 8-year-old on an e-motorcycle that ended up going to Primary Children's in pretty horrible condition because an 8-year-old didn't stop at a stop sign and cross traffic hit him. So it's just one of those things that we're starting to experience and deal with, especially during the summer months.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. I just think it's a very difficult thing to come up with some sort of ordinance and enforcement of it, you know, because I understand kind of both sides of the story. I mean, you know, I think if Councilwoman Rodella was here, her young children, they like stuff like this, and people like the adventure, so we don't want to be too restrictive. So it's kind of this deal between liberty and safety. But I'll give an example today. I think our problem isn't so much with electronic bikes as much as where it crosses over into the little motorcycles. So I had an example this afternoon. I had a patient come in. This woman's middle-aged. She just finished her treatment for lymphoma and just had her PET scan showing that she's cancer-free. So she's been out trying to exercise more, and she was out on an e-bike on the Murdoch Canal Trail, and she indicated it was a 4 or 5-year-old on one of these little motorcycles. And she said at least he had a helmet on, but he cut into her, flipped her off her bike, and she broke her arm. So there's just too many of these instances happening, and I have the citizens come to me all the time complaining about we can't walk down the sidewalks because there's all these motorized scooters coming down. So I don't know how to find the balance and how to help this. I think we need to do a fair amount of education because, you know, we live in an affluent community, and so I think it's kind of natural for parents to kind of go out and buy these things, but sometimes I think we need to talk about some of the safety. And I think we really need to be careful that we don't have 4 and 5-year-olds and 8-year-olds out on a small motorized bike cutting people off and not following the rules. And you just gave a good example, and then I had the other one. But I remember a couple years ago when I decided to walk up to the Highland Fling, I just about got knocked off the sidewalk by a couple kids coming up the sidewalk on motorized bikes with all the fling crowd. And so, I just don't know what the answer is, but there is a fair amount of risk here and people getting injured. And I get a lot of people that complain to me, and I said, I think it's a problem because it's hard to enforce. We can come up with rules and education, but I'm not sure how we can fix it. And I don't know if it's fixable. So I'm kind of, I don't know quite what to do as a council person as well as a physician because people get injured. And sometimes I think if we could educate people and encourage parents not to have their young kids out on these motorized bikes, risking other people's safety, but it may take a serious injury or a lawsuit or two before things are kind of straightened around. I don't know. So I'm kind of like Councilwoman Rice. It's hard for me to really come up with a good answer, but I appreciate your work.
Councilmember Rodella, my guess is you have an opinion about this one.
Yeah, I do have an opinion. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so all three of my kids ride e-bikes. They're class 2 e-bikes. I think my main thing is that I think class 1 and 2 e-bikes are the same exact speed as a regular bike. If you look at the average speed of a regular bike on a trail, it's between 14 and 20 miles per hour. Recreational is about 10 to 14 miles per hour. So let's just stick with what a bike speed is and stick with that. I would never allow a class 3 on a trail, but I do want to make sure that our kids have a way of transportation, you know, with the financial situation that our state is in. Kids are having to transport themselves a lot further because they don't have two parents at home these days. So I think that we need to remember that this is a means of transportation for kids right now. And really, I am in complete agreement. Class 1 and 2 should be allowed on trails and sidewalks. I don't like them on roads. I don't want my kids on roads. I tell them to stay on the trails as well. I have a kid who just got in a really bad scooter accident, and the helmet saved his life. And I think also we need to stick with the state law of making sure everyone under the age of 18 wears a helmet as well. But my preference is definitely along with Chief William. We're not going to sit there and do a radar gun and see how fast these people are going. These kids and adults are going. Let's just stick with class 1 and 2 and say, you know, let's allow it on trails and sidewalks. That's what we would do is with bikes as well.
So, Kim, your preference is to regulate sidewalks and roads different than parks and trails, or the same?
I would do the same. I mean, just allow class 1 and 2 overall. That's my preference.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Courtney.
Thanks, guys.
My preference would be, much as it pains me to have us all unanimously in favor of the same thing that Wes is recommending, I think to go with that class 1 and class 2 allowed, let them be used any place that bicycles are currently allowed. I would be open actually to looking into and discussing and potentially identifying some small loop neighborhood trails where we don't even allow, where it is a pedestrian only, but I don't feel a need to push that. But that's something that I would be open to considering. With regard to speed limits, when we're talking about vehicles that don't have speedometers on them, I don't know how we can set a speed limit. It's not just how do the police enforce it. We're expecting that every 14-year-old in the city is going to be an expert at how fast they're going, and I just don't think that's a viable option. Lastly, with regard to e-bikes for the police, have we considered the possibility of branded uniform standard rubber bands to keep the trouser pants away from the...
It's not that the pants get caught in the spokes. It's just the look. I don't like it. And I fight with my officers all the time about this. So.
That's all I've got, Mayor.
Chief, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I hesitate bringing this up in a public meeting, but I'll share a personal experience. So it's been 5 weeks, 6 weeks ago that my niece was involved in an accident in Payson on a scooter, but it was one of the high-powered scooters. She's still in the hospital. She was just showing Chief Patton that she just had her skull cap put back in. Because of the swelling that she had. She was unconscious and was on, I don't know if you want to call it wasn't life support, but she was in critical condition for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I just, These things scare me. I've seen what they've done. I've seen major injuries, and we have a personal experience that we've got to educate our residents on how dangerous these can be, and we just need to help educate them. So,
Agreed.
Yep. Okay, anybody else? Did you have something else, Councilman Rice?
So I just spent a week and a half in Park City, and they have multi-use, but I just pulled up their rules again. And they go by strict age tiers, helmet requirements, and a 15-mile-per-hour speed limit on multi-use paths, while keeping e-bikes banned on standard single-track dirt trails, which really doesn't apply to us. But it's kind of interesting, at least they call out when you were we did bikes and walk, but when you're walking, the biker calls out and says, upcoming or coming, I can't, behind you. There was something that was hollered. I'm probably for the 1 and 2, but this age thing really bothers me because I've seen some very small children that have no driver's license riding these bikes, and they don't know what they're doing. I'm really inclined to ban 2 and 3, but I think that's a little too restrictive. But I kind of like what Vineyard has. 15 miles per hour limit, a class 1 or 2 allowed on the trails. I worry about going from Highland into where American Fork or Pleasant Grove, where a 2 might be banned or something, but I think that a 1 or 2 is reasonable. Banning 3 altogether is preferential to me. But I really think we need to have a really strict age tier limit on that. That's all I got.
Okay. Rob, do you have the direction that you need? It sounds like everybody's leaning kind of one way.
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Is there any other information that you guys would like us to gather before we talk about this again?
No, the only other thought I just had, in kind of on the favor of allowing at least 1 and 2 class, is it can also be an accessibility thing for the city. There was a time in my life I couldn't walk very far, and I rehabilitated myself biking, and I could only go around a block, and I had to build it up. There's people that this is how they can get out by having these electric assisted devices. So there also are benefits not just to kids but to adults to have these devices available to them. It's a very complex subject, but what I've heard is kind of a tentative in favor of allowing class 1 and 2 on sidewalks, trails, and roads. We can always delve more. There's a lot of classifications we can get into going forward, but I'll start heading that way in crafting our ordinance.
Is it difficult to come up with an age tier?
The state already has an age tier. My preference would be to follow that rather than try to create our own on top of it, just so we don't get conflicting
Well, to
rules.
print it out so the police don't have to argue with people.
I think
mean,
the
to put it
education
on-
portion, like Chief Williams said, is the key part of this, of saying you can do these things, and these are what class 1 and class 2 bikes are. It is not the e-motorcycles, the class 3 bikes. Don't use those on our trails, and perhaps don't use them at all.
I think just to add to that comment, the things that will make it easier for us to enforce are things that are factual. Is it a class bike that's allowed? Are you wearing your helmet? Are you falling in the specific age group? The mile per hour, the things that can get vague and that you can argue about, that's where it makes it a bit more difficult. But I'll work with Rob to make sure we come up with language that would satisfy the council, make it easier for us to enforce.
I used the term, I was intrigued by the 15 mile an hour. After hearing your comments and other comments, I don't know that that's enforceable.
Okay, I think we're good. Perfect. We are on to communication items, and this first one is Chief William with the flock cameras.
Wes, you wanna come join me? Oh, I'm kidding. Maybe we can duke it out up here. No, I'm kidding. I'm completely kidding, so.
Get the boxing glove.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk a few minutes about flock cameras. As you are well aware, the city entered into an agreement with Flock a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2024, to purchase 6 cameras, not purchase them, use cameras, because we don't own the cameras. Flock owns the cameras. I think some of the things that are driving some concerns amongst some residents and others across the state and across the nation are the data and how is the data used and who owns the data. There's been discussion that Flock recently changed its terms of services, which there was some verbiage in the terms of services, but if you read the terms of service the way that I read them, it didn't change the actual way in which data is handled, specifically within our usage. Now, I want to talk about what we use them for specifically, and then I'll talk about what you can do to monitor what Lone Peak Police is using them for and how they're being used. But back in February of this year, Flock did change some verbiage in their terms of service. What did not change is who owns the data. And the data that is collected on the cameras that are owned by Highland City is accessible only to the person who entered into that agreement. So any data that comes off the cameras that Highland City owns is owned by Highland City. It is inaccessible by Lone Peak Police Department, which we use. We just recently, as of within the last 30 days, and we use them when it's appropriate. We do have policies and procedures which govern the usage of the cameras, and you can find that policy actually on our website. It's been there for the last couple of years. But you have to have a legitimate law enforcement purpose to be able to access the data that's on those that comes from Flock. And you can only use it for specific purposes. And if you go to our webpage and under resources, it's the first one there. It says automated license plate readers, and it's the policy that we have. And I'm just going to go down the limitations of use under our policy 461.3. The data shall only be used for the following official enforcement business, and this is under Utah State Code, as part of a criminal investigation to apprehend an individual with outstanding warrant, to locate missing or endangered persons, and to locate a stolen vehicle. So every time an officer logs in and accesses this data, it logs the date and time that they logged in, the information that they used it for. They have to enter in a case number, which is generated by our office to be able to, that will give them a reference of why they're accessing and what they're accessing it for. And then they need to write a report on what they did. So it's all documented from front to back. Now, our data that we own is purged after 30 days. If we want or need to retain any of that data, we need to pull it off the system, and it gets added to that case number for whichever we used it for. If you go to Flock's Terms of Service, it does say that they do not sell their customer data. The data belongs to the customer, which in our case is us. And the data is only permitted to be used for, again, legitimate law enforcement purposes. And you can find that on Flock's website. Now, I know there's differing opinion on how that is interpreted, but I will dare say, and if Rob wants to comment, he can. This has been challenged in the courts. There is state legislation that's been introduced the last 2 years that would further bring the guardrails in, and it's Representative Chevrier that's been running that legislation, and myself, along with others in the law enforcement arena, have been working on her on that legislation. Now, it has not passed the last 2 years for various reasons, and we can get into that offline. But it will come back again this year in the legislative session, and my recommendation and suggestion would be to use to see what those groups can come up with, because you have all interested parties that are having this discussion on both sides of the ALPR discussion or the automated license plate reader discussion. So that would be my recommendation to do that. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I know this was You know, there's been some emails that have gone back and forth, and I'm just happy to answer questions that you might have.
I've got a question. You said that data is purged after 30 days and we have to download it if we want to keep it. Can other entities download it also?
So there is a system in a way in Flock where you can share your data with other agencies. Now, most of the agencies in Utah County are sharing those that have these automated license plate readers are sharing data with each other. So for example, we solved, it was a burglary that happened in Highland on cameras that were located in Springville, because we had information on a vehicle description and a possible plate, and it was actually seen on a camera in Springville. So we do share that data across our local entities and agencies. Now, I do believe that we also share with some agencies in Salt Lake County as well.
Okay. So, and this is just a communication item, so there's no decision that we need to make. But Councilmember Rice, did you have questions?
So I've gotten a lot of emails on this and several calls. And the thing I keep hearing the most, and I keep saying, you know, the officer, because my son's a police officer, for anything, it doesn't matter whether it's Flock or whatever, he has to have a reason to look at anything, right? And they have to log in and what case it goes, you know, just like you said, that applies for everybody. I think the thing that I keep hearing the most, that I'm most concerned about maybe as well, can, when it leaves the state of Utah and goes back east, I don't know where Flock comes out of, but how they use it, and because people seem to be concerned about what they do with it, not necessarily what you do with it, but what they do with it and what happens when it leaves Utah County, the state of Utah, and if there's a way to prevent it from leaving the state of Utah. I know it, you know, it dissolves after 30 days or whatever, but they seem to believe or have noted that it goes back east, that our data is being used back east, and that people can be targeted. And that's not coming from me, that's coming from my constituents, so.
I don't have an answer for that, because that's the first time I've heard that comment.
Okay.
So
It's the first time I had as well, but I still take them seriously, so.
Yeah.
And there seems to be quite a fervor going on with this right now, is from, I guess KSL did a piece on it or something, which I still have yet to see. I don't know who did, but I trust our police. I trust you guys. I don't think it would be used to target anybody, but it's difficult to explain to the general public that, you know, we really do solve cases with these things, and it is for their protection in the long run. But anyway, I really don't have anything. I think, you know, I know that there's a grandma request out, just so the public knows. There is one that we've received. I have another individual who said he was going to grandma request it, and I said, well, I think there's already one in that you might want to, but everything is online that the council discussed last year prior to me being on the council. But, you know, I just have concerns where it goes or who uploads it, not in the state of Utah.
Yeah, I thank you, because that reminded me of something I wanted to bring up. So again, going back to the LonePeakPolice.com website and under resources, there is a Flock safety tab there, and then if you click on a red button, I wish I could plug into the system here to show you. If you click on the little red button there that says Flock safety, it's a transparency portal for Lone Peak Police, and it will give you how many cameras are operated by Lone Peak Police. Now, it does say 12 because we've got 6 here in Highland and we have 6 in Alpine that we have access to. And it will give you the number of searches that we did as a department in the last 30 days. And as of today, we've done 27, so less than 1 a day that we've searched the Flock system. Now, that may have been multiple on one day searching the same case, looking for different aspects of a vehicle that we might be looking for. But we do utilize it. It's not heavily utilized, but it is something that we do utilize and solve crime with. And I don't know if I did mention what we did in the last 30 days. So anyway, thank you. I reminded me I wanted to bring that up.
Thanks. Councilmember Smith?
So Councilwoman Rice brought up some issues that I'm hearing as well about, and I think people are kind of worried about what happens with the data I think you've explained that better, but I think that's an area of education we're going to definitely have to do. So when we originally talked about these flock cameras, there was a concern about how they're set up so that they're just looking at the streets and not looking into people's yards.
Yeah.
So what precautions have you done to kind of prevent that?
So, again, having access to those images, we did when they were initially set up, not in Highland, but when we initially set them up in Alpine, you could see into some individuals' backyards. We contacted Flock, they came out and readjusted them. We worked with them specifically, and we do have images from all 12 cameras that we have access to. That they're specifically looking at the roads, and we're gathering the rear license plate of vehicles, not anybody's backyard or personal property, so.
So there's safeguards that have been put into place?
Yeah,
'Cause
and that's
that was a big concern a couple years ago
Yeah.
when we talked about it.
And that's something, again, that we work with them when we initially set them up, to be able to adjust them to make sure that we were only looking where we were intended to gather the information.
So you gave the example of a crime that was solved using the flock cameras and different things. Have you had a number of instances where that's been beneficial?
Yeah.
Because I have people ask me, does
Yeah,
it
so
help?
within the last 30 days, again, we solved a crime. We actually solved a sexual assault that occurred at the mouth of the canyon. We were able to get information from that vehicle and found the individual, and that individual was arrested. We've solved construction burglaries, we've solved theft of bicycles, we've solved theft of Amazon packages. The list continues to grow as we continue to utilize them, so.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Courtney?
Yeah, I think that many of us had some privacy and primarily privacy concerns when we first considered funding the flock cameras. And one, the process that's in place, and two, the auditability that's in place, and frankly, the trust that we have in our police department was what convinced us that, okay, this is a reasonable thing to do. I do have some questions similar to Councilmember Rice about how the 30-day deletion and the perpetual irrevocable worldwide license to use all of the data interplay, and what happens or what recourse anybody has if the data leaves the jurisdiction. Particularly if it leaves Utah, what uses might there be that we don't have any control over? And the further away we get, the more we get into people that I don't distrust them, but that I don't trust. So that is one concern that I have just kind of going forward. I looked at the terms of service change, and there were lots of changes to the terms of service. But comparing it with what we approved when we first went through, I'm not convinced that there are any material changes to the terms of service. So I don't think that there is really a recent change, having dug into it more, that is something that we need to be concerned about.
I did not read them like you read them. I guarantee I didn't read them like you read them. But I did look into the data usage and how that's shared and who owns it. That's the concerns that I've been hearing, and so I didn't see any changes as far. Did they change verbiage? Yes, but I think it provided clarity, at least for a more lay person that doesn't understand contractual language like others might. So, just my observation.
So, bottom line to me, thank you for the work in putting this together and discussing it with us. I think it's important for us to understand what the process is, what the implications for data usage are. Rob, I may catch up with you just to understand a little more about how those two things interplay and what control anybody has depending on the location of the data. But yes, it is clear that they provide a law enforcement value. And at this point, I am not seeing a major privacy concern that would override that concern. So again, thank you very much for putting the information together and coming to talk about it with us.
Councilmember Campbell?
I support this 1,000%, and the reason is the control that's in place with these cameras. Ironically, we have 6 cameras that are flock cameras, and they're controlled that literally you can see them with a lone peak, and you can share them if the need arises. There's a lot of controls in place. I've been embarrassed using Pulse Point, so I went to Watch Duty. Watch Duty is an app with all the fires on it. Well, I noticed the little blue dots, 14 blue dots in Highland, and I click on it, and they're cameras. It's UDOT cameras that are available to anybody in the world to go online right now, and I watched myself come to this today. You can go back 6 hours.
Were you going the speed limit?
Yes.
Okay.
And if I weren't, you couldn't do a thing about it. Video's not going to help you on that one. But the bottom line is that there's so many protections in flock, and there's so much misinformation out there about it. I watched a video of police going to somebody's house saying, you left your house at 8:32, and that wasn't a flock camera. It was AI-generated video. That there's a lot of fear-generating misinformation, in my opinion. The key boils down to, and the concern that Liz has, I think, needs to be looked at. I am concerned if it goes beyond just what Lone Peak can access and what you would allow to others to access, like Springville and Springville sharing with us. Those parameters are in place and those controls are in place, and because of that, I support this. And the fact that we have 14 cameras that has 0 control. I can literally go on there and see who's going, how fast they're going. I thought I could read license plates, but I checked it more thoroughly and I can't. So the license plate reader part of this does add an element to flock that is more than what you can get here. But I can still, the make of the car, the color of the car. Anyway, I support it, and I really applaud your work in solving a crime of that nature that you just solved. Wow, that's just real testimony that it's needed, it's effective, it works, so thank you.
Okay, so, and again, this is just a communication item for tonight, so there's nothing we need to do, but I would suggest if you have concerns or other questions, reach out to Representative Chevrier. She had a lot of good information, and she has some contacts as well if you want to get more information, but I'm guessing we'll get direction on this from the state, if anything.
Yeah, and just before I sit down, thank you for the trust that you have in me and in the officers that you employ. It does mean a lot. It's not lost on me that the concerns that residents do have about their privacy and what they term as being tracked. I don't see it that way. I see it from a different perspective, but I also have a different view as well. But I do appreciate that those concerns are there, and I do think we need to talk about it and discuss, how it's being used, what's being used, the guardrails and the things that are put in place to make sure that it's used properly. And I just want to say thank you for your trust.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And as long as you're here, you and Chief Patton, I think there have been lots of things this summer that have made me gain, and I already had a tremendous amount of respect, but even a newfound respect for the work that you do. And so thank you to both of you. It's much appreciated and recognized. Okay, something much less exciting, but nonetheless important, parking regulations. Is this you, Rob?
It is, and I love parking regulations.
Perfect.
The council received an email a couple of weeks ago from a resident regarding the parking along Town Center Boulevard, the angled parking that's in front of Toscana and the businesses on the east side. We took a look at that, the chief and I, and kind of see what our current rules are and what our options are for enforcement. And perhaps surprisingly or unsurprisingly, our code is a little bit out of date, hasn't been updated in a while, and we're recommending some tweaks, but we also want to make sure we understand what the council would like to see with these parking spaces. So our code's a little bit odd, and kind of boiling it down, it says basically we regulate however we sign it. On the east side, on the business side, there's a 24-hour parking restriction. On the splash pad parking here, it's no overnight parking, and on the Toscana side, there's no signs at all. So our code kind of talks about 24-hour parking. It's not super clear. Our kind of the communication is we've looked at this and we can do better parking enforcement. We want to understand what the goal is here. Is it to prevent all overnight parking, or essentially treat this as visitor parking for the businesses and the Toscana residents and the splash pad? Is it 24-hour parking so the Toscana residents can use it, but they can't just long-term park? Or should we not regulate it all and just let people park however they'd like? So that's kind of the discussion of, in order for us to do better enforcement, we need to kind of clarify our code and put better signage out there so the residents and patrons of the businesses understand what we're asking them to do. So with that, it's kind of a brief communication item of we've looked at it and we need some direction on what you'd like to see out of the parking spaces we have around Splash Pad and Town Center Boulevard.
Councilmember Smith, questions?
So I guess the question is what is the problem? Is it the overnight parking? Is it the angle parking itself? Is it the difference on having it one way on one side of the street and another? Because I'm sure the residents in Toscana probably use that angle parking a lot. Yes. And that's one of the issues that always happens with high-density housing. Because theoretically, they all have, interior parking and garages and that, but garages oftentimes become storage units. So I guess the question is, and then when Mobedo opens up and different things, are we going to want people to park along there so they can get in? And I think when we had the discussions, that the answer was yes. So I just think maybe we just need to work on making it consistent. Probably really, I'm opposed to 24-hour parking if we can find some way to do that. But I think it might be interesting to just see how many people in Toscana is using it for 24-hour parking. And has there been any outreach to do they have an HOA or different things? Is there a way to go ahead and ask them a little bit of information? Because I'm sure they're the ones that most of the time that are doing the 24-hour parking. So I'd recommend reaching out to the residents of Toscana and see if there's a problem. I think we really need to avoid 24-hour parking around the splash pad. And that's become kind of accessory parking for Toscana again. And so, I appreciate you bringing this up because unfortunately, like in my neighborhood, our main road that goes in to my part of the neighborhood, at times I've counted 16 cars parked along the side of the street. Well, if we had an emergency and had to get the fire truck, the ambulance, and different things, they couldn't get in because it's like one-way traffic because of all the parking. So I think there's a tendency a lot with people as we keep buying more cars and don't have a place to put them. And so I recommend we talk to the residents of Toscana. Two, I think we need to make it consistent. I like the angle parking because I think you need it, especially for the businesses there. And so I don't want to eliminate that because parallel parking is a problem. But I'd like to see some consistency because you can't have one side have one deal and one side the other. So, but it becomes a problem. I mean, it's a problem in my neighborhood, and I've been trying to do some changes. In fact, I'm going to send some anonymous letters here before long because it's a problem. And so I agree. I think let's just make it consistent if we can.
Councilmember Courtney.
Yeah, I'm inclined to view it as three different zones. That the splash pad is one zone, and that the parking there is really primarily intended to support the splash zone, the splash pad. And I think the reason that we have no overnight parking there is because that makes it less likely that residents from Toscana will be using those spots because they won't come in first thing in the morning and then park all day. And so I think no overnight parking there actually makes sense because that's the reason, that supports the reason for having the parking. For the, I'm drawing a total blank on the name of the street, but Park City Park West, or heading out to Timpanogos from the splash pad. The very northwest section of it, north of the Toscana residences. I think that we have talked about that as something that's important for Mobetta's and Wendy's to have that parking. And so maybe that's a zone that it makes sense to have a shorter term parking limit, that it's a 2-hour, 3-hour parking limit. For everything else on that street, I think the primary purpose of it ends up being for Toscana residents because the businesses are required to have their own parking on site. And so we're not really looking to support that. And toward that end, having a 24-hour maximum parking probably supports that use in that case, because the thing that really gets in the way of residents being able to use it is primarily going to be somebody who has one or more cars that they just store there instead of park there, and that eats up that parking space. So that'd be the way that offhand I would look at it. Is I think there are at least two. I would view it as three with that northwest section, different zones, each of which has different goals and requirements. And within each zone, I think we should absolutely be consistent. The east-west side of the street, I don't think should have different rules right there next to Toscana. But within the disparate zones, I think it makes sense to have some different regulations.
So, Doug, that's kind of, do you mind if I?
No, go ahead.
So, so you're talking about some sort of signage, right?
Yep.
And that makes sense. But you're having different zones. Like you could have around no 24-hour parking around the splash pad. You know, the businesses are limited of a couple hours or something.
Yeah, I think by the splash pad, the no overnight parking, it makes sense because that, even if we allow 24-hour overnight, but no longer than 24-hour, you still have Toscana residents using those spots, and then they're not available for splash pad users. But yeah, it sounds like we need to have signage in place before, one, the rules really clearly exist, and therefore before we can do any enforcement.
Councilmember Campbell?
If I were to say anything, it would just be repeating what's already been said. I think Scott summarized it very well, and I think Doug added some elements to it that I think you agree with, Scott, and I agree with. So I think we've got some good direction here that totally makes sense to me.
Councilmember Rice, do you have any questions?
I do. I have quite a list, actually. So the last time I looked, the average household in Highland has 4 cars per household. That's just, keep that in mind. I don't really have a comment about that, but that's a lot in my world. I thought there was already signs, no 24-hour parking around the splash pad. There are. So I don't think we necessarily need to, maybe we need to add more, but I think we've, got enough. I don't know how many parking spaces are around Toscano, but they do have an HOA, right, Rob? So here's my question. When we have a resident, I'm just going to use on my, the state law, as I recall, says that you cannot have more than 1 car on the street if you have to have off-street parking for a rental. So if I had a rental in my basement, which I don't, but if I did, I have to have one car, they usually have 2 cars, 1 car goes on my property, 1 car goes in the street. I believe that's state code. So I'm wondering why this kind of doesn't apply for Toscano. And I'm not expecting an answer. I've looked at this and I've driven around there quite a bit to take a look. You know, in other condo type areas, they usually assign outdoor parking. They'll have like apartment 1090 or, you know, something like that, so they're assigned. And maybe there's not enough for that. I don't know, but I would recommend, you know, their HOA taking a look at signing and, or us signing, perhaps. So, there was one more. I don't know how the police mark those cars. I mean, if you go to like 2 or 3 hour parking along there, you know, in Provo, they mark your tires with a chalk mark, right? That's how they do it in Provo. And so I know because I've had to move my car twice when I go down there. I'm just really curious as to, you know, I don't know if more police enforcement is really necessary along there, or if they can, you know, assign those to people on, and I'm talking around Toscano, because there's a lot of cars all the way around, and I don't mean just in that parking area on the one side, I'm talking down the street as well, right? That's what I've noticed, and I've been in there in the morning, early morning, before people get up, and I've been there in the evening and about noon. So people do move their cars, but there's a few there that I recognize that the gentleman that emailed us might be complaining about. But anyway, those are my points. I don't know if this is really I think we need to give Toscano a chance to kind of fix it themselves before the city starts to regulate it for them. I'm not really keen on that. If it's necessary, okay, I'm not gonna die on that hill. But I think Toscano kind of needs to take a look at who's there and assign some parking, and, you know, they've got a double garage underneath. Does that mean they each have 3 cars? Don't expect you to answer that either. That's really all I had. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Just with regard to Toscana, regulating it, I would be completely opposed to ceding parts of our right-of-way to a private HOA and allowing them to assign ownership of those. And I don't believe that Toscana has land inside in order to have place for it.
So I understand that, Doug, and I agree with you, but I was on the Planning Commission when we allowed Toscano to come in, and my understanding was that was for, so initially, the first floor was for businesses, and that was for business on Toscano's side. That's what I recall. I don't remember what it says, and you said it really hasn't been changed since 2010. So that's my thing. I thought they had preferential treatment there. So if they do, if that is indeed, maybe you don't want that, if that's really our right of way. I didn't think it was. So just to clarify, I mean, I agree with you. If it's really ours, you're right. But I think if it's theirs, we need to give them the right to clean it up first.
So I have an opinion about this one. So I feel like this is really an issue that is a police and staff issue at this point. Like, I think we need to be responsive to residents, but when I see something like this, I think we've got staff and we've got our police who are already kind of involved and handle this. And so we got a complaint, and I would say, for me personally, I would say, let's let staff and the chief address it how they want to. And then if, you know, there are further issues, they can come back to us. But I feel like this is maybe getting into nuance that is maybe not necessarily in our lane at this point. It may get there, but for now, I would like to see what staff and the police are able to come up with and then go from there. So that's my 2 cents. Okay, anything else about that one? Okay, let's talk about fireworks. So this
Yes.
one, yes. Then you are not going to be happy with what I have to say.
Oh, no.
So as people may know, the governor issued another. By issuing an order, I mean he didn't issue an order. I don't really know what happened, other than the authority was given back to the cities to decide what they want to do for the 24th. And just so you know, while I was kind of thinking about this, and we had to make a really quick decision, there wasn't time really to think about it, but to me, I looked at the criteria that we had looked at for the 4th of July, and if something had changed significantly as far as the weather conditions or fire risk, to me it would have been a time to revisit and think about it. But conditions were largely the same, and so we made the decision to go ahead and ban. And I did talk to some of the other mayors about this, and just so you know what everybody else is doing around North Utah County. So Eagle Mountain has done a full ban, so has Lehigh, so has Cedar Hills, Linden, Alpine, American Fork, Orem, and Pleasant Grove. We do have Saratoga Springs, which has done a targeted ban. So there are selected areas and times where you can discharge fireworks in Saratoga. As part of that, as we were talking about how to be able to still celebrate, an idea came up that it would be really fun to do a big county-wide fireworks celebration over Utah Lake in a kind of safe and controlled manner. And so that we'll be shooting off fireworks from a couple of locations in the lake on the 24th. So I talked to a few of you about this individually, and people were okay with me suggesting that we could contribute a small amount to this county fireworks show, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody was kind of aware of that. And I did say that we should not be contributing as much as the larger cities. So anyway, that's where we are with fireworks. Questions, comments, concerns, criticisms, I'll take them.
I think we need to point out that it's not officially banned until the fire.
We got the notification.
Oh,
that
we did?
Yeah, the
Okay.
state forester has approved. They have the list available on their website. Dr. Smith, did you have a comment? I know
guess-
you wanted fireworks. I'm sorry.
Well, it's the 250th, but I understand. Although it did rain last night. But I thought you were going to just bring up the county fireworks, and I'm in support of that. And I think Provo and Lehigh were each donating $5,000 or something.
Yes, sir.
And you know, I thought it was appropriate for us to maybe donate $200 or $2,500 or something, because I think it'd be great to have a nice fireworks show over the Utah Lake, and hopefully you can't set too much on fire there.
Yeah, hopefully.
And it's a long way from Highland anyway.
Right. And I will say that this was a concern for pretty much everybody I talked to, that they wanted to make sure this is not effectively turning into a permanent ban, and that conditions are reassessed next year, and that this isn't just the default position. So my guess is that the state legislature will weigh in on that question, but I'm super aware of that concern as well.
So what's happening? Is there a county show?
Yes,
on the
there's a
24th?
county show on the 24th at 10 o'clock, and they'll be lighting fireworks from a couple of different barges in the middle of the lake. They got some, I think, a little bit of funding from various places, some private funding, so it should be a really nice show, and was really a great opportunity, I think, to come together as a county.
And did we donate?
We did donate. We donated $3,000 so that it was less than what the other cities are doing. Is everybody okay?
That's perfect.
Any other questions, comments, concerns about fireworks? We also did do this in cooperation with the fire chief as well, by the way. He is the expert.
Just one quick comment that when you're talking about evaluating conditions, in particular looking forward to next year, one thing that has been discussed, I think a couple of us independently brought it up, and then the state was talking about it also subsequently, is that if, as we move into the fall, that conditions improve, I'd be very supportive and plan to reach out to representatives at the state about it for establishing this year, pick some day that makes sense and is meaningful for folks to be able to do fireworks later in the year. Who knows what the mechanics of that
There's a lot of
look
fireworks
like.
on New Year's Eve anymore,
Yeah.
as we know in this building.
Yes.
And
We are proof that fireworks can start fires.
Fires, yes.
Yes, indeed. Okay, that's all I had about that, so we can move on to Jay's debut performance at today's city council.
This is everybody's favorite part of the meeting, I know it, so I'll just, without further ado. So, orphan parcel sales revenue uses. We are now that we have this process established where we can start selling off orphan parcels, we wanted to discuss with you what you had in mind for how we would use these funds. Wanted to go over some background. Similar funds that have been used for projects that benefit the neighborhood. That's something that we have done in the past. For example, the tennis court in Canterbury Circle was resurfaced and striped for tennis and pickleball. We've also used proceeds from open space sales for the parks maintenance building. Some of the proceeds from those sales went to that as we paid cash for that building. So those are, I guess, as far as precedent setting, those are really the only things that we have to rely on. Proposed uses, projects that benefit the neighborhood. It's also been brought up, fences to mark the boundary between city property and private property where that boundary is not readily apparent. This would help with encroachment issues throughout the city. Makes sense in some areas, other areas it would not, but it would definitely help in the whole, this land is my land, this land is your land issue we have. Well, I gotta, like I said, I gotta spice this up. So I just, that's really all I have to set the stage for a discussion that council might have among themselves of what you would like to see.
Okay, and again, this is just a communication items. We don't need to decide anything, but let's see if anyone has a comment.
Yeah, we have yet to actually finalize any sales, so that,
Perfect.
you know, yeah.
Councilmember Smith, what do you think?
So there's been a lot of discussion over time where the open space neighborhoods and selling the property and instituting this has been going on, 15 years or something. And some of the discussions, and of course now we've eliminated the special, or the open space special service district and the open space fee and all those things. But there was a discussion in the past, and at times I believe agreement, but I can't quote you exactly. But I think there was a discussion at one time is maybe take, if it's a particular neighborhood where there were several parcels sold, to take 50% of that and maybe put it back into the parks or trails in that neighborhood, because it's basically, you know, those citizens are purchasing and that, and maybe it should go back to help that neighborhood, but the other 50% going into the general fund for other things. And the mayor and I were just discussing, somehow I'd forgot that we put money from that sales into the park maintenance building. But, you know, I think that's an appropriate thing because obviously we maintain all the parks. So, you know, and I know in Wimbledon, when they started buying along the trail, I think there was some hope that it would go to resurface the trail that still stays there and maintenance and things. So I just like to throw that idea out. I think you could do a 50-50 thing. Say, hey, we're going to take 50% of this and work on your playground, or 50% on things to beautify your neighborhood, and the other 50 goes in for the whole city. But that's just my opinion.
Anybody else have comments about that?
I like the idea that 50% goes to the neighboring trails, but I believe all of it needs to go to trail maintenance, not just to the general fund for any use, but to the general fund for other trail maintenance issues. If there's anything that I've heard from residents that you would call really significant input, it is our lack of trail maintenance. I think it's lacking, and I think part of it is that we have this designation of it's to remain wild. Whatever it was before is what it's going to look like. Well, it ends up being weeds, not as wild as what the pictures on the little diagrams we all approved were. They had little flowers and such. Those flowers aren't there, and it's just a bunch of weeds. But we only chop them down twice a year. And I know Foxwood Estates, that trail that we just put in, has not been maintained since we put it in. And I think that needs to be addressed. And the only way we can address that is with funds. So yes, 50% for the neighboring area, I really like that because they're the ones that invested in giving us those funds. But the other 50% would be for trail maintenance.
I like that. I like that. I'd support that.
Liz or Doug, anything?
Since, I'm with Ron on this. Since I'm with the trails and parks, we just really need some help with that. And I know some of you have been generous with that, but we've got to have more. And I don't even want to look at some of the trails after this heat wave to take a look what's going on. But I would support that going into the trails in just about any neighborhood because we've got to have some help.
I have a little difficulty with this because on the one hand, I don't think that where the money comes from has anything to do with what we spend it on. That it's city property that somebody is buying, and I don't know that there's any reason why if somebody buys something from the city, we have to use that money to benefit them additionally. However, the land that we're selling was originally dedicated or exacted from, or whatever the legal term is, from the residents in that neighborhood.
Yep.
And so that aspect of it does matter to me. I'd be happy with kind of step back, half a step. And at this point, it is city property. It is owned for the benefit of the entire city, not for the benefit of a particular neighborhood. So balancing those two things, I'd be perfectly good with a 50-50 split. Personally, I would be inclined to earmark half of it for specific projects in the neighborhood and pull the other half into either the general fund or a capital account or a parks account. Not arguing that trails don't need a lot of attention, but if we pull it into the general fund, then it's just our responsibility to make sure that we prioritize maintaining and updating trails. And we have that money available, but that way, if it turns out that there is a significantly higher need in the city, okay, it's in the general fund. We use it for whatever benefits the city the most.
Okay. Do you have what you need, Jay?
I think so. It looks like there's support for some aspect of putting it back into the neighborhood in some way or another and, using it for, one thing to keep in mind, this isn't going to be a consistent or necessarily ongoing source of revenue. It's going to have fits and starts as, and then eventually largely dry up once we sell all of the orphan parcels. I have people asking me to help them create orphan parcels, and I've said no. We're keeping them all intact, but So, yeah, this isn't going to be a consistent stream of revenue that we can put toward ongoing things. So maybe think of it in that way as well.
Or a
but,
huge stream of revenue.
Yes, that as well. And so, but yes, I do feel like I have what we need to do, so.
I would say just one other thing to keep in mind, like it'll go, at this point, I think I heard from majority of you to, with trails, right, to add to what Jay was saying, it'll go in park capital, but ultimately it's like staff maintaining a spreadsheet that says, okay, this subdivision contributed this much, kind of a thing. There's nothing in the budget that will necessarily distinguish that money, right? Because once it's in a fund, it's in a fund. And so that will rely on staff to do that. And like Jay and Mayor spoke to, because it's intermittent and little here and there, it will be difficult long-term to do a ton unless we wait a long-term time, if that makes sense, to actually build something up significant there. But happy to prioritize trail maintenance. I've spoken to many of you about that recently, ultimately.
So I don't know if it'll take the form of, okay, we just sold this. This is, $3,000 was the revenue. This is how much new trail can be repaved, redone for $3,000. We'll need to look at, what that looks like, and
And I assume that'll just be part of ongoing budget discussions each year.
We're charting a lot of new territory here.
Yep.
So thank you for your patience and your ideas.
No, thank you. Do you want to tell us about the survey? This is another communication item.
Yes, I would love to. Okay, I'll go over what the survey kind of looks like right now. The survey is a tool that is intended to help you as council with policy decisions. To the extent that you use it as such is largely up to you. Staff, for our part, we use it for funding prioritization with the budget. A lot of what we do and don't recommend in the budget has a lot to do with what we see in the survey results. Last year we had questions about some things that people would like to see at the cemetery, and for the time being, a columbarium is not high on priorities, but it is something that is in, especially Stephanie's, her work with the cemetery. It gets brought up. It's something that would be an amenity that we could do, but as of right now, we know that it's not the right time to do it if we ever do it. So it helps us as staff. Hey, I'm having real talk here. So that's the sort of way that we as staff use it. It helps us in our priorities. Some years we have themes or topics. If you remember, 2 years ago, we focused on land use because we were updating our general plan. Last year, we focused on library funding, or at least, I wouldn't say we focused, but we had some questions about library funding because we wanted to get a better idea of where people sat as far as their support for a tax increase or some other way to help the library with its current funding issues. So that's the lay of the land as far as the survey goes. I sent you out an email that had last year's survey so you could see what, refresh your memory as far as things go that we usually ask on that, and give you some idea of what maybe we could ask. Some of the responses I got were to add additional questions because right now we ask, how are we doing at, staff, council, public safety, and also specific departments, interactions that council or that residents may have, with building permitting or utilities and so on. Those are things we like to ask every year so that we can see how we're doing on our customer service. But one council member suggested maybe also asking questions to determine if residents feel like we are allocating enough resources, too much, too little, kind of a Goldilocks question as far as how are we doing on allocations? Do we need to allocate more to trails? Or do you feel like we're doing enough here on, whatever it might be. So that's one that came up, and I don't know how much support there is for that. Another suggestion was to join with the USU Utah Wellbeing Project. I wanted to go over that one a little bit to give you more detail on that in case you're not familiar with it. It is a survey that is administered by the Utah State University. It is an online-only format. It is issued in March, which would be too late for our budget purposes, so that aspect of usefulness would be diminished. The focus is on personal well-being. Some categories are about topics that the city has no control over. And what I mean by that is if it's asking about, oh shoot, what are some of the, some of the topics are safety and security, mental health. We as a city don't have we can't do much to push the needle on mental health, physical health, perhaps as far as like our trails and things go, living standards, local environmental quality, education, connection with nature, leisure time, social connections, and cultural opportunities. So we may get data on, hey, this could be improved or this is doing great, but in the end, it's not anything that we as city staff and city council can necessarily affect. And I know one of the other comments that was emailed was, let's only ask questions that we can do something about. So that was something I just wanted to bring up on that. We are limited in what we are able to ask specific to Highland. If we pay more money, we can ask some questions specific to Highland. When we last participated was in 2022. We last discussed this on the 8/19/2025 meeting, and there was some concern about survey fatigue, that if we are sending out our survey in the fall and we're sending out another one in the spring, are people going to be annoyed that we are sending out too many surveys? So that was kind of the gist of the discussion there. So that is the overview of suggestions, feedback that I received. And so now, once again, turn it back to council as far as what would you like to see?
Okay, Councilmember Campbell, is there anything that you want to add that we didn't already discuss or email back and forth about?
No, I think we've got a clear understanding. I support what we're doing. I had some thoughts that the USU survey should be looked at, but after what you've shared, it's in March. It doesn't help us for the budget. I am very interested in the results and have looked at the results on how do you feel about our permitting process? How do you feel about the treatment you're receiving at the library, at the front desk? Those questions, I think, are valuable input for you as a staff, but also for we as a governing body, to ensure that the staff is respecting our residents, and it gives them an opportunity to give us some feedback that I believe is useful. It's useful to the staff and it's useful to the council.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice, do you have anything you would like to add?
Do you want to get me started?
I want you to comment whatever you would like to comment.
Surveys are just not my favorite. It hasn't been with the city. It wasn't when I was an educator. I think you can make a survey say whatever you want it to say. I think you can, the way you phrase the question, it can make a person lean one way or the other. I'm just not, I don't care for them. I'm not going to die on this hill. If you want it, that's fine. But I think it's a lot of time and money. I don't see us really consistently using it. You know, and I am not for the USU Utah Wellbeing Project. I don't think we need to focus on what we can change if we can change it. And as everybody knows, government, when it does move, it moves slowly. So I'm not for that one at all. I just think it's really hard. Jay, I appreciate all your work. I'm not saying that I don't, because I don't want you to take offense to what I'm saying. But I just know that when I put a survey together for parents, I could make it go whichever way I wanted it to look, and I did that. And everybody does that. A lot of it is just human nature. So I just think it's a lot of money. I don't think we should put 2 out a year. And I have a real worry about who we actually reach. I talked with Aaron about this, who actually responds. And still, I mean, you guys read my email. I don't need to go over that again, but I'm just, still maintaining, their, who they are, but do they really live in Highland? Is it your 16-year-old son that's filling it out? I always gave extra credit if they got a city survey or a census, that they sit down as a family and do it together what they thought, but it wasn't somebody under the age of 18 filling it out. It was an actual resident. So those are just my concerns about it. But I just, again, I always look for ways to save money, and I know how hard you work, Jay. I saw you smile, but I do. I do. You just need to know it. But I don't think that they're all that effective in the long run. So, thanks.
Okay, Dr. Smith?
Well, I appreciate all the work the staff does in collating it, and I think we've heard some really valid points, and Councilwoman Rice has brought up, we've discussed the validity of surveys, and they're easy to become biased one or the other. I do think surveys help us collect information. And some of the surveys things, and I need to send in my suggestions and different things, because I've had a couple busy days here. I think a survey kind of talking about city services or some questions is helpful, in that you could say, do you like the way that we let people stand up at the first of city council? Do you feel like you're heard when we have a public hearing? I'd like to get feedback from people just to say, do they like the format that we're using? I mean, we've got a new 6 o'clock meeting, and does that make it convenient for people to come and express their opinions? Are we giving good notification for public hearings? So some of that feedback, and I think our staff is doing a really good job on the front desk and different things and that, but it might be good to hear people's opinion. Do you feel like you had good customer service when you came in, and do you have any suggestions? And I made the one suggestion about when I had my Home Depot experience, which was really a positive thing, and because right after that I heard one of the citizens kind of complain, and I said, maybe we can do a Home Depot thing where they just kind of turned the computer and helped this poor soul, me, who has trouble getting all these things done on a computer, and they just walked me through, and it was great. So maybe, using a survey to kind of get information from the public, and because sometimes the only time we hear anything from anybody is just a complaint, and maybe it would just be good to get suggestions and things. So we're always going to get complaints that the trails and the roads and everything are not maintained. I think we're doing the best we can. But it might be nice to maybe focus on a park or two. So we've got this wonderful Highland Family Park, new, heavily used, everybody likes it. But we had a resident stand up today and say, hey, is there something that we can do to improve the Highland Glen Park? And, and maybe people have suggestions. What are some things you'd like to see in the Highland Glen Park? What can we do to make that better? And the mayor and I have talked about it'd be nice to have a U.S. flag there and have a project to do that. And then obviously the resident saying, hey, I'll help raise money so we can put in these $1,000 garbage cans, because they're at least $1,500 now, I think. But, I'd like to get feedback on stuff like that, on maybe a particular park. I'd like to hear feedback on Beacon Hills Park that's never been quite finished. So I would like questions about specific parks and maybe customer service and what can we do. Now, it's always kind of interesting to read on the council because they never like us. we always score the lowest, and yet I think we try pretty hard to listen and make the best decisions we can. So what are things that we can do that, you know, and I think there are especially some members on the council now that spend a lot of time working with citizens directly. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think surveys give good information. Do you need to base city code and ordinances on that? I think it becomes hard because, again, like Liz was saying, it's really hard to say who filled out the survey and how valid is it. But I think it's a good tool to get feedback. And so we can look at it and say, hey, what can we do to make this a little better? So that's kind of where I'm at. Not to make policy decisions so much, but to make customer service decisions, make decisions maybe on what can we do on a priority for a park. I don't know.
If I just, some comments that I thought of as you were all speaking. I really like the idea of asking, like, what could we do at your local park to help? We have a park tax that we collect that is for the purpose of going back into helping revitalize our parks. And so that would be a question we could ask where we could act upon because we have funding set aside for it. I think that would be great. As far as who fills it out, we do have some control measures to make sure that they are Highland residents. You know, we can go through and sort, because we ask, what is your address? They have to put in a valid address. If they don't, it automatically gets kicked out. They can't even complete the survey. And then afterward, I go through, and if they put anything outside of Highland, I kick it out. I actually can go through and spot check and check for valid addresses within Highland. I do take the time to do that. So the integrity of the survey, I believe is pretty good. I'm not going to say it's, you know, I will, you know, stake my life on the fact that everybody who's filled in that survey, but at the same time, we're also not asking anything in these surveys where we feel like anybody would need to go to the lengths to sway it one way or the other. And you can see, you know, if there are 15 results from one particular address, it starts looking fishy, and I can detect that as well. So there is some ways for us to sort out tomfoolery when it happens. Another thought I had was, as you're going through and, you know, giving feedback to us, what would you like to see? Maybe take some time to look at the free comments that were done from last year's. Those are the things that we didn't have a place for them to put it on, you know, a question for them to answer A, B, or C, but that's what they wanted to say to the city. And so maybe take a look at those. And I can make those easier for you to get to if you need me to. I can send out an email with, you know, where we have those on the website. So,
Councilmember Courtney.
I think there are three different types of questions that are useful on the survey or potentially useful on the survey. One, which I think is most of what our survey has traditionally entailed, is kind of long-term trend directional information. That if it turns out that people have been rating a certain thing at about 80% satisfaction for several years, and then it drops to 75, and then it drops to 65, I think that tells us something meaningful, that there is a directional trend that we are seeing. We probably don't have enough information to understand why that's happening, but we see that there's some directional trend. The second one is for educational purposes. We had a question that we put on last year, for example, about, you know, did you know that you can sign up for text alerts for city news? Ultimately, it wasn't primarily that we wanted to know how many people were aware of that and how many people weren't. That was just an opportunity to push some information. Now, the yes and no may be interesting data, but that's not the primary reason that it goes on. And then the third one is something that at least has the potential to give you specific actionable information about things. And that's why I would like to see some of the Goldilocks kinds of things. You know, is the level of service or the level of resources that we're allocating to it or whatever, low, about right, too high, maybe really low, really high, added on the list. But because I think that can give us some specific actionable information that, you know, if there's a 5-point difference between a couple of things, that probably doesn't indicate anything to us that we probably can't take really confident readings out of that. But if there are some significant variations, you know, if 75% of people think that we are spending too much resource or the level of service is too good on maintaining our trails, for example, then that probably tells us something on where we should be relatively prioritizing our resources, or in that particular case makes us suspicious about who and how is filling out our surveys. I'm in favor of continuing a survey for all three of those reasons. And I would like to, though, see if we can identify a few things that maybe give us some clear, actionable things going forward.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate, I think those were a lot of good points that I appreciate. Lots of things to think about. I like the survey. I agree with Councilwoman Rice that they can be manipulated and you can write questions that aren't reflective of what's happening and more what you want to think. But I feel like we discussed this enough as a council, and I know you do as staff, that I feel like we are genuinely vested in knowing the answers to the things that matter to us, and that it is a true effort to understand what people think. Otherwise, the main mechanism that I have is, I'm not a big social media person, so the main mechanism that I have is just who's calling me or what my friends are saying, and I feel like that is giving me a much more of a bias than the survey. So it's not perfect, but I personally like it. Okay, heading on to the annexation of county parcels. Rob, this is you.
This is just a brief notice and update of a future thing that'll be coming to the council. One of the bills that got passed in the last legislative session regarded county islands, unincorporated islands within cities. And specifically, they added a law. The county's tired of maintaining small pockets of county within cities, and so there's a new law that only applies to first and second class counties, so Utah County includes us, that if there is an unincorporated island within the city, completely encapsulated by the city, and it's under 55 acres, the county will automatically annex it into the city. We have one area. This is on the southwest corner of 6000 and 10400. It's the Bueller, Degelbeck, and Gardner properties down there. It's unincorporated county, and it's around 50 acres. So they would be automatically annexed into the city, unless we opt out of that process. It'll be next year, is the deadline to do that. This is more just notification. We're going to talk with the property owners just to get a sense of what they would like. I assume since they have not annexed into the city up until now, they would continue to like to remain that way, and we'll bring that back to the council. You have the choice of continuing to opt them out of automatic annexation. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that, but this is just notice of, we'll talk with the property owners and then bring back something to the council in a future meeting.
I believe I know already what their answer is going to be. Their property tax will go up if we annex them in, and I think that's one of the reasons they're hesitating to do it. Now, when they decide to develop that, obviously that'll be a different story, but at this point, I will be flabbergasted if they would not want us to opt out.
Does anybody else have any comments? I think I know Dr. Smith's opinion on this. Anyone else? Okay.
I'm glad you're talking to the people there, but I think it makes sense to be part of the city. You know, I like to kind of keep Highland.
Okay, Rob, the community development update is also you.
Yes, nothing too major, just wanted to give you an update on a couple of what the Planning Commission's going to be looking at the meeting next week. We're looking at cleaning up some site triangle regulations and making one site triangle rule rather than 3 or 4. And then addressing the landscaping standards that both the Planning Commission and the City Council have talked about regarding xeriscaping and the water-wise landscaping to qualify for the rebate programs. So working on that as well. So you'll see those in future meetings depending on what the Planning Commission decides to do with that.
Perfect. So that's all we have for our regular session. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break before we head into the work session. It is so hot in here. Refer to them as such.
Dadoos.
I'm not saying that. So here's what I would like to do is I would like to have Rob maybe give a brief introduction. And then I invited Mr. Thane from the Planning Commission, because he was chairing the meeting when they made the ultimate vote, to come and tell us a little bit about their decision and their process, because they've spent a lot of time with this. And then, as long as we have other planning commissioners who were nice enough to join us, I would love to just get a couple of thoughts from you guys if you're interested. If you're not, it's fine. I appreciate you showing up, so thank you. I didn't issue, by the way, a specific invitation to Planning Commission. They just knew it was on the agenda, so here they are, which is fantastic, so thank you. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do the introduction from Rob. We'll let the Planning Commission tell us kind of their thoughts. Then I know Rob has a little presentation, and then we can have some conversation.
Thank you, Mayor. And my presentation will probably overlap with Trent's a bit. So we've been talking about these kind of indirectly and somewhat directly for a while. We've had it in the Moderate Income Housing Plan for a while that this was the year to adopt it, and coincidentally, this is also the year the state requires us to adopt it, so that dovetails nicely. Under state law, we have to allow them by October 1st, 2026. We have to have a regulatory framework in place to facilitate this. And here's the kind of basic cans and can'ts of that state law. We have to allow them on all residential lots that have at least 11,000 square feet, which is about a quarter acre. We have to allow conversion of accessory buildings to DADUs, but that is subject to our normal whatever setback and height and all those other regulations that the council may adopt. So they say, allow the conversion if it meets whatever standards you adopt for where it should be on the lot. We can't require more than 1 parking space if it's a small detached ADU, so under 650 square feet, or 2 parking spaces if it's over. So 1 or 2 is the most we can require. We cannot impose specific design standards, just like we can't do for homes, but we can regulate height, setback, utilities, and kind of other general things related to detached ADUs. So that's kind of the framework we're operating under state law. And Planning Commission spent a long time. They had an initial plan, then it kind of got put on hold, and then they worked for several months to put a kind of final proposal together. So that's what I have kind of prepared, as well as I think the planning commissioners that are here. But I think that's kind of the brief introduction to the topic.
May I ask one question of clarification on this state law slide? That it says that we must allow conversion of accessory buildings subject to setbacks. Does that mean we cannot require them subject to height or footprint size or anything else?
No, we can. I put setbacks as the main limiter, mostly because if this accessory building doesn't meet those other requirements, we're probably not going to allow it regardless, because it's an illegal building. But this will come up because one of the major conversations the Planning Commission had, and I think the council will also have, is which setbacks should we apply, whether it's the accessory building ones or the home setbacks. Because there's a lot of people who built right to accessory building setbacks, and they won't meet home setbacks, and that might prevent them from converting a building. So, but you are correct, Councilmember Courtney, that it's subject to all of the regulations that we will adopt.
And I have a question on the cannot have specific design standards. So we cannot have a standard that says it must be consistent with the current home design.
We can do that. We can require it to be complementary to the home, and that's also what the Planning Commission recommended. What we can't do is say, you must use this specific roof type, and you must align your windows in this specific way. There's a little bit of leeway, but
got it.
like with homes, they passed a law several years ago at this point to stop cities from acting like an HOA, essentially, is how I defined it, where they were, cities were regulating the look of single-family homes, and the state said, stop doing that. And they kind of applied most of those same rules to detached ADUs.
But complementary to...
Complementary to the home, make it look like a house,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Wonderful, thank you.
Let's go ahead and hear what the Planning Commission's thoughts are. I think it might answer some questions and probably bring up some new ones. So Trent, thank you for coming.
Thanks for this opportunity, and I'm grateful that we have half of the Planning Commission with here. So I wrote a few notes down just to keep me on track. Please stop me at any point if you have a question. But first I wanted to identify what the purpose was behind the ADUs in the first place, the detached ADUs. The objective was to provide a place for one of the things that was identified was to provide a place for our aging community to stay in our community and have a place for them to stay. So Chris and I, that was one of the things that we identified. So in that regards, I looked at Covington and Lehigh. What's the average size of a one-bedroom apartment? 1,100 square feet. I don't know about you, but I'm looking for retirement. I can't live in that small of a place and still stay, so that would drive me out of the community. So just to remember, that was one of the problem statements we looked at.
What was the square feet? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry that you said. What was the square footage you said?
1,100 was what the retirement community that I did some little bit of research. What we were looking for was between the 650 and 1,500 is what we were talking about in our discussion. The second was a place or a space for our kids to be able to live in our community. And then the third was to address the new state requirement for affordable housing. And we've already talked about that one. One of the things that we came up with was a lot of the rules, and we can go into the details of a bunch of them. They're very straightforward, very simple. They already existed in the ADU rule. We just added on to them. So my recommendation and what we talked about was using the existing detached building code with a few exceptions. So detached building in an R140, you can build up to 5% of your lot size. And so, thank you, Rob. I did some research this last week. Just visuals are very helpful, and to make sure that we calibrate what we're talking about and we're all looking at the same thing. So what was discussed is the 5% rule on a detached could also be used, so we wouldn't have to develop any new coding for this. The setbacks, I proposed that we use the same as the detached buildings, but the commission voted for using the same setbacks on the detached ADU as the existing house. So there's some discrepancies there. One of my big things was if you've got a detached unit and no one's taking care of the yard behind it, the neighbor behind it's gonna have to see that mess and it's not taken care of. If the structure is back and closer, there's just less to look at, less problems. But it also puts them closer to look at the neighbors. So there's a couple different ways to look at that. And as Rob already brought up, existing structures that are in the city, if we go to the same setbacks as a house, would be excluded. They couldn't do a conversion. They couldn't be grandfathered in. They would be left out of this option. Yeah. So those were kind of the big pieces behind it. The size, we started with 650. I pushed for 1,500 again for the reason I mentioned before. I'm looking for what I might want to do. I need more space. We settled on 1,250 is what the commission settled on. And oh, there we go, thank you. So setbacks, same as the home, allowed, rear setbacks could go a little bit closer if it was below the 15 feet. Cannot be between the home and the front property line. That was a new addition. Height not to exceed the home height. So we followed the same existing rules, makes it easy to regulate. Size, there were three things to control here. Accessory buildings did not cover 5 or 7%. 7 was for the different zone. Dadu's livable area, 1250 for lots under 1 acre, 1500 for lots over 1 acre, and existing size of the home size. I don't remember what that was about, but what, can you go back to there we go. So as I did a little bit of research, if you apply the 5% that's already covered in the accessory buildings, you can only put on a 1 acre lot 2,000 square foot building. So if you regulate the largest that a ADU can be external at 12 or 15 or whatever you decide, it's still, using that overall rule, cannot be more than the existing 5% of the lot. So in this example, you could have a 2,200 square foot building, but only 1,500 of it could be an accessory building. If you drop that down to a half acre, same example, oh, and excuse me, this was assuming a 5,000 square foot home. Same 5,000 square foot home on a half acre, the allowable building envelope, here we have it 7%. I thought it was 5%, but thank you for correcting it.
It depends. If it's 5% for R140, it would be smaller.
Yeah.
This is if it's R120, which also could be 20,000, half acre.
Perfect.
I should have put up both, sorry.
No, that's fine. I couldn't remember the difference, but 7 or 5 really doesn't matter. The overall space, maximum you could actually fit with the setbacks in a perfect size lot would be a 1,400 square foot accessory building, of which 1,250 could be a detached accessory dwelling. And then if you go down to the quarter acre, this is the one that struck me the most, is we have to allow it down to here, but if you follow this existing code and the 5%, 550 is the largest you could actually put in here. 550 is not much bigger than the tough shed. And in most cases, depending on the lot size, you couldn't put anything in there, or it's not feasible. So I think this one almost regulates it out of that lot, that smaller size. So that's pretty much all I had. Happy to answer any questions, or as you wanted to invite the other ones up.
I appreciate it. We may have questions.
Perfect.
Thank you. Any other planning commissioners? I know that you guys had lengthy discussions. I listened to them all. I know had a lot of talk, good compromise, a really good conversation, but if there's anything you want to add about kind of your decision-making process or things that Trent didn't mention. Wes is always down for a comment.
I'm always down. Trent did a good job, and he did a really good job kind of conducting the last discussion that we had.
You guys all did a great job. It was a lot of work for a long time, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was good. It was a good discussion. I was thinking along the lines of Trent as far as size goes, with 1,500 being kind of the sweet spot, depending on acreage and stuff. One of the things that we talked a lot about, and I think we all moved around, was the setback issue. And I think ultimately, I think I started on team accessory building setback, and then I think I ended mostly on home setback, with the exception of the rear setback. And I feel like the spirit of the law is kind of an issue of privacy encroachment, kind of on neighbors and neighboring fences and stuff. But I felt like, and I can't remember who brought this up, or if it just came up organically, but this idea of, well, if it's a one floor DADU, then we can move it to 20 feet at a rear setback. And I feel like that was in keeping with the spirit of these setback restrictions. So I really like that, and where our discussion ended with that. But I think ultimately Trent nailed it, keeping our you know, longtime Highland residents here, giving them an option to stay here, and then our kids also an option to stay here, at least temporarily. And I like how, and I think Trent mentioned it towards the end, these examples kind of show how it's a self-regulating code. When we base it on the 5% and the 7%, it's going to prevent a lot of homes and property layouts from taking advantage of this, but it will also keep large lots from taking advantage of it in the other sense. So that's all I have. I'm sure these other guys have more to add. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Mon, welcome. It's always nice to see you.
First of all, the state says...
Can you pull the microphone down a little bit?
The state says
Thank you.
11,000 square feet, so I can't argue that much as I would love to, because I think that is, a quarter acre is way too small to put 2 houses on. We've got to keep in mind too, though, that the most, like a house on a quarter acre, it has other houses on quarter acres around it generally. And if you're putting 2 houses on there, and this is one of the reasons why I like to stay with this setback, I mean, the guy next door could have a house in his, practically in his backyard. So that's why I think it's so small, but that's why we try to keep these setbacks so, tight. You want to build another house on your quarter acre, it's going to be a lot smaller, obviously, than if somebody, but that's my main thing, is to keep in mind the neighbors. These people are used to having a quarter acre with something a quarter acre away, and that's what they moved in for, and that's what they intended on. So if we're building other houses on all this property, I think we have to respect the people around us, and that's the main thing with these setbacks. And I just want to put a nail in for the setbacks.
Thank you. Commissioner Howden, yes. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much for everything that you do. I just want to rattle off some of the boring stuff. So reverting to the big picture here, we're not talking about chopping the lots up legally. So it's the same legal footprint. There's only one owner. It needs to be owner occupied, and I'm sure I'm going to forget some things, but it needs to be owner occupied, at least one of the residences. The utilities are being shared. So there isn't a separate billing thing going on. It's the same sewer pipe. And so you have all the practical issues with slope and whatnot going into this as well. And then what are the other things that we kind of rattled off that we spent a lot of time chatting about? Oh, parking. Just to make sure the address thing, I know the council had spoken about this about 2 months ago or whenever you were doing it. And then just to make sure that architecturally it's attractive. And that's it. I just wanted to rattle through the punch list of things, because we could spend a lot of time, may not necessarily need to spend the time talking about things like that. I did talk to a few cities that in I believe Farmington, for the last 10 years, they've been allowing people to split the parcels. You're basically creating 2 lots out of one. And they have had, it was astonishing. I think he said they had 1 application to do that. And when the person contacted the county, they were like, oh no, that's too much drama. We don't want to do it. And the other feedback that I received, and I don't know what Chris's input on this would be, but the other folks that we've spoken to in cities that have a decent population of these ADUs, they have no measurable impact to the utilities. With regards to accessory buildings, I'll use the unfortunate white elephant that is at the entrance to Highland. What that would mean practically is if someone has a massive garage like that, they could put, kind of in the barndominium spirit, they could have a living quarters inside that 10,000 square foot barn, but they would be restricted to whatever the council thought was the appropriate maximum based on our things. And then the last thing I just wanted to waffle about was to say, at fault, we would suggest to the council to just defer to existing where it's practical and possible, rather than creating a whole new set of ADU-specific rules, to just have things point to existing code where practical. That's it.
Okay. Much appreciated. So much good work going into it. Thank you. Rob, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I think they covered it all. The only one thing I will, because I kind of threw Trent off earlier, if this were an R140 lot, the accessory coverage would be limited to 5%, which would be 1,000 square feet. So it would be even smaller than what's shown on there. So if this was R140 and a 20,000, they would have even less space to put a detached ADU on their property.
Perfect. Thanks. Okay, Councilmember Courtney, what are your initial thoughts?
I guess the two things that immediately come to mind are, one, that we have information about, and there's a lot of discussion about setbacks from the edges of the lot. But particularly if you look at the next slide, I think it's the next slide in, it makes me wonder if, and I don't see it anyway, if we actually need to introduce something about separation between two detached dwelling units, because it seems like we would want more separation there than we would between a shed and a dwelling unit, just because there's more chance of fire that then spreads to the, I don't know, I would defer to the fire chief, to staff about that, but that's the first thing that kind of pops to mind.
So you caught that I was trying to make the maximum thing fit within this setback. We do have an accessory structure setback of 6 feet from the home. There are fire code provisions, but they're sometimes less about spacing and more about if you're a close enough level to another habitable structure, you have to put in some, fire construction. So you can put things, because you can do things right next to each other,
right?
But you just create fire breaks in your walls. So fire code would probably not manage it that way, but we do have an existing 6-foot separation. Of course, the council could adopt a larger home separation setback for detached ADUs. It would just be a new regulation.
And I hadn't thought about the just construction, including firewall. That introduces questions of, do you need to do that just on one side, or do you need that on both sides? But that's kind of detail level of getting into it. The other one is that I don't think that I have a problem with a 1,500 square foot detached ADU on an acre lot or larger. I'm a little bit concerned about 1,250 on a smaller lot. I'm not convinced either way, but I am a little bit concerned about that. And to Chris's point about, if you've got a great big accessory building now, that you could put just part of it as the flip side is also true. That if you can work it with the footprint, then you're not really limited to a 1,500 or a 1,250 or whatever square foot structure. It's just that the dwelling unit inside it has to be that. And I haven't really fully thought through or wrapped my head around if that is something that is concerning to me, and even if it's anything we need to address. So.
Okay, Councilmember Campbell, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I have watched all of the commission meetings up until the last one. And I did not watch the last one. I just didn't get the time, and I really wish I had. I should have, and shame on me, but you've put a lot of work into this, and it's very, very appreciated. And having served on the Planning Commission, and having times when I felt like we did a lot of work, And then when it came to the council, I'm thinking 10700 in particular, there wasn't much credence put into that work that we had done. And they made a decision different than our recommendation. And I swore when I came to the council that I would not do that. That I'm going to look very seriously at the work that's been done by the commissioners. And in this case, it's been fantastic. Last meeting aside, I can't speak to that, but it's been fantastic work that you've done. And I will only go against that if I've got good reason to. And on this one, I have no reason to. I think everything you've recommended makes sense. The 1,500 square foot on over an acre makes sense to me. I'm of that age where I would like to stay in Highland, but I probably can't do that unless I live in something quite a bit smaller than I'm currently living in. And I've got some children who would love to be in the home that I'm currently living in. So those options, I really appreciate the fact that that was your objective, was to make those options available to our residents, because senior housing in our city is an important thing that we have to continuously make sure we're doing enough to keep our seniors here. If they choose to stay here, allow them to be here. That includes Longhorn property and some other things, but I really support everything you've done here, all the recommendations. I wish we had a little more teeth in what we could require design-wise, but if it fits or complements the home, then maybe that's enough. But I just want to express my gratitude to you and the hard work that you've done. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Hey, Rob, one quick question before we go to Councilwoman Rice. What specifically do you need from us coming out of this, since it is a work session? How much detail do we need to go into, and what is the...
Just if there's something, you know, major about these regulations that the council would like to see changed and updated, just give me direction so I can write that into the ordinance to be presented to the council. You'll obviously have a chance to look at this again before you adopt it. You'll have a chance to make any changes you'd like, but it's easier if I can write the ordinance based on what the council wants now, so you can see the final language and make sure you kind of have a chance to look at that before you go to potentially adopt it.
Thank you. Sorry. Go ahead.
All right. So I did a couple of things, and I did attend the council or the commission meeting, and I do appreciate their work. However, and there's a couple of things I want to bring to your attention, because I believe that doing this is going to change the face of Highland. And I think we just need to be very cautious. That doesn't say I'm against detached dwellings, but I sent to each of you today, and I sent it to Stephanie as well, so she knows what I'm talking about. I also sent it to Chris Howden if he wants to look at his phone, but the home you're looking at sits in Orem. It is on a 1/4 acre, and it is a Patterson home. It was actually my very first home in this end of the valley. It is 1,158 square feet, with 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. The garage added on to that makes it 1,500 square feet. It's about a 400 square foot garage, approximately. That is 1,500 square feet. I want you to take a look at how large that is. That's big, okay? And I feel that 1,500 square feet on a 1 acre lot is too big. I mean, if you want to up the acreage for 1,500 square feet, I heard what Trent said. Sorry, I just lost the name in my brain. 1,250 square feet. I would go 1,100 square feet under an acre, because and you have to remember, and I realize I'm a little bit all over the place, we started out at 750 square feet with this. I have a tendency to call them casitas, because I've looked in St. George a lot about what their casitas are, and they have a variety of things on that. As I watched and was sitting there with the planning commission, there were 2 planning commissioners that seemed opposed to the 1,500 square feet, even though, on 1 acre, even though they went ahead and agreed with it. And so when I addressed that with them, they said, I wish I hadn't voted for that. Okay, I want to make that really clear. So I'm going to tell you what I don't want to happen. And I know what Chris said, and I really respect that. But I'm going to tell you that somewhere, somebody's going to find a way to subdivide a lot. And I don't know when, I don't know how, but there's always a way. I also asked various constituents throughout Highland to text me or email me various houses with different square footages. And there was one here that's 1,050 square feet that's totally adorable. I thought the house I lived in with my 4 sons and myself, I was a single mom at the time, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a double garage at 1,158 square feet was large for me at the time. And then somebody sent me one with 600 square feet. They're all totally adorable and totally doable. So I'm going to tell you what I don't want. Right now, I know that we have families that are renting out their basement, and they have enough acreage to have a casita. I'm just going to call them a casita because I don't like the dadu thing. I don't like that. Detached unit. I don't want 3 families on 1 lot. I think that's too much. For a state that's so worried about water, I don't believe that that's not going to increase a water bill. And I know that some of this is in code. Rob pointed this out to me. I don't want a Boise Cascade home on it. I don't want a tiny house, trailer type house on it. And I think that's in our code, so I'm not too worried about that. And I don't want it to be able to subdivide to go to a flag lot. I think that, I know that with our current codes, with some new houses over square feet, so many square feet, that they have to have sprinklers in the house. If you only, to put a fire out, if you have 600 square feet distance between the home and that, they're both gonna catch fire. That's way close. That's like, I don't wanna be insulting to anybody, but that's like daybreak close. So I don't know if we can add, like if you have a new construction with a detached unit, to put sprinklers in there. I just feel that would be super wise. I do want it to be owner occupied, as Chris mentioned. The off-street parking is going to be an issue. If we have 4 cars per resident now in homes, you've got to have something. I mean, you can only allow, if you've got somebody in the basement renting, you're in the upstairs, and you put a casita in, you just went up to at least 6 cars. Where are you going to put those? So I think those are all things we really need to consider and we need to really be cautious about. I keep hearing people say, and not necessarily tonight, but we want to keep Highland Highland. But I feel like in many ways this is a super big attack on our R140 zoning. And again, I am for the casita. I am. But I think, anything over 1,158 square feet is too big. Okay? And 4 people lived in that. My sons are not small. If you've met my sons, they are not small people. They never have been. And then if you want to go 1,500 square feet with 2 acres or something more, that's fine. But I am opposed to the square footage of what we've got right now. So I think 1,158 square feet or 1,100 square feet for under an acre, and honestly, that's really close together. This home that I showed you, that I've texted to you guys, and I even texted Kim, I've texted Scott, I've texted to everyone, and I've texted it to Aaron. but there was still enough distance between the homes that we were okay in American Fork. It wasn't, you know, California close, sorry, Doug. Anyway, that's really all I have. I may have a little bit more as I sit here and think, but I want people to be able to, you know, I would love to have, my kids will never be able to afford my house. I know what my house just appraised for. But I would love, I sit on a corner, there's no way I could have a casita anywhere on my property unless it was a little tiny trailer, like I just mentioned, a tiny house trailer type that I pulled onto that, which won't happen. All right, so that's kind of where I'm at with it. But I think if you had another planning commissioner here, that they would advocate as well for a smaller square footage on 1 acre. That's all I have, thank you. And Mon, so it was Mon and it was Sherry Kramer that were opposed to the 1,500 square feet, just so you're aware. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Liz. Dr. Smith.
I really appreciate all the work that the Planning Commission has done on this. And a lot of this is driven by kind of state regulations, growth in the state, all the stuff that we get from the legislature. But you have identified a need in that there are people that, and I've had people approach me and say, hey, we'd like to turn our main house over to our kids, but we would like to still live on the lot in a smaller lot. But I actually agree with most everything that Councilwoman Rice said. I think these ADUs really have a chance. So I think it's okay for Highland to be unique. I think it's okay if we have larger lots. I think it's okay if we have bigger homes. I think there are a lot of people in the state that think we're being elite because we like that, but I think there's a role for that. I don't think we all need to look like the city west of us or the city south of us. I think there's a place where you can have bigger lots and nice homes and an open field. And I think it promotes some good things because I've never been impressed that crowding and increased traffic and all this stuff is really beneficial. It provides needed housing, and I understand that, and oftentimes for either retired people or young families that can't afford others, but there are some negative things that come from that. And what I think about is traffic. I'm really worried about parking, and the state regulates how much parking we can do and all that. So I want to give an example. I think 1,500 is too big. I think we need to decrease that a little bit. Maybe I could go for 1,250 or something, depending on the size of the lot. But I restored my grandparents' home over in Pleasant Grove. It's 2,300 square feet. And I was just thinking about that. Not a big home. It was built 104 years ago. And that's 2,300 square feet is including most of a basement. In that area, there are 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a large living room, a dining room, and a good-sized kitchen. And so just how big do we want these accessory ADUs be? Do you really need 2 or 3 bedrooms and 2 or 3 bathrooms and all that stuff? I think they should be more of a, and I think Liz has called them a casita. And I've been in casitas in St. George, and they have a bedroom or so and you know, a kitchenette and all that, but do they need to be a small home? Because I grew up in a 1,200 square foot home, and we thought we had lots of room. So things have changed over time. So I like much of the work. I'm glad we separated interior ADUs. That was my big complaint when we presented this before, from detached ADUs. I'm glad we've separated that. We need to kind of have a discussion if there needs to be some spacing in between them, because on the smaller ones, it looks to me like that's really an attached ADU. But I do think we have to be careful because there are some people, and they talk about the big white building on the Alpine Highway, who that met code at the particular time, but they ran with it. And people do that all the time. I mean, it's just human nature. They kind of push the limits. So I think we have to be really careful with the code that we come. And I agree with 90% of this. I disagree with the ultimate size. I think it needs to be a little smaller. A 1,500 square foot home is a pretty good sized home. And do you really need that? And what you're basically doing is subdividing the property. I'm sorry. So I like much of it. I would lean towards smaller structures. I support Councilwoman Rice on that. I support the Plan Commission on everything else. I like the setbacks. I like all the discussion. I appreciate all the work you've done. I just have some disagreements on size.
So it sounds like size is maybe going to be the biggest sticking point that maybe we should start with. Does anybody else have any additional thoughts after we've heard the discussion or questions for the Planning Commission? Kim did not have any.
Yeah,
She said that was shocking, but true.
I have just one thought that came to mind specifically after hearing Scott and Liz to some extent. It was something you said that made it stick in my mind. I wonder if maybe one of the ways that we can address some of the concerns about size is looking at a maximum livable square footage and a maximum footprint. That if we're talking about I'm just going to pick big numbers for the sake of picking numbers. If we're talking about a 2,000 square foot livable space that's all on one level, that's very different from a 2,000 square foot space that's a rambler.
That's on, yeah.
For example. Maybe that's some middle ground
right
there that, you know.
So you're saying basements or, okay. Yeah.
For example, you know, that if, and again, let's say we stick with 1,500 square feet, but we say that there's, you know, a maximum footprint of 900 square feet.
Of living space?
No, footprint.
Footprint, okay.
That means that some portion of this, because the garage is going to count as part of the footprint probably. So it's not like you divide it in half. But maybe.
So you're saying 900 plus a garage?
Maybe that means that, you know, it's 2 stories of 900 square foot footprint that together total just 1,500 square feet of living space. And again, I'm not advocating for the 1,500, that's just an example. So just a thought that comes to mind.
So how do you add, I beg your pardon, Madam Mayor, so just, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, so do you add to that the double garage for off-street parking? I mean, how do you do that? Because my home totaled 1,500 square feet, excuse me, I came off, 1,500 square feet with a garage. And I would love to knock on their door and measure out that garage, just because I don't, but I'm pretty sure it was 400 or 500 square feet. It's big.
The way we currently do minimum sizes, as I recall, is that minimum sizes are all based on footprint. Well, footprint and style of house. That, you know, if you have a rambler, you can have a 1,200 square foot footprint, if I remember correctly. If it's a tri-level, I don't remember, 900 or.
Yes, though I can't recall the last time I've ever had to apply that rule, because I've never had someone try to build a home in Highland that's only 1,000 square feet.
No, that doesn't happen.
In the last, right, however long I've been working for Highland. So I just wanted to clarify, I think the question Councilmember Rice was talking about livable space. So currently the definition of livable space, as it's been proposed, mostly by me, but the Planning Commission reviewed it and kind of distinguished the livable space versus the non-livable space. So it doesn't include a garage or rooms that don't have the internal access. So you could have an entire garage and an upstairs level that is the detached ADU with a separate exit, and we would just count just the space where you're actually living in it, not a garage space or a pool room that's stuck on the outside, but you only access that from the outside of the house, not from the dwelling unit. So just when we're talking about livable space in these regulations, that's what the proposal that we've been talking about.
So I know that our CCNRs, we do not have, I'm not in open space, I don't have an HOA, but our CCNRs in Highland, in that area, says nothing under 2,200 square feet. So that on one level. So we also need to address if we can do a basement. Are we going to allow to dig? I mean, I'm assuming they could dig a hole, and that if you have 1,000 square feet up, you have 1,000 square feet down.
So the proposal was, so it's taking this example on the screen, I've shown it as a one-story building, essentially. A 2,200 square foot building, and 1,500 feet of it is rooms and kitchen and bathrooms for the dwelling unit. If you're going to do split level, you'd still count the entire space that's connected to the ADU. So it's not 1,500 and 1,500, it'd be 750 and 750, though the entire building still might be a 2,200 footprint on the lot. That's what we already allow in Highland. It's just the portion that's used for the living purposes is 1,500 total, no matter how many floors it's split across.
Well, and I beg your pardon, but one more time, I'm struggling. I mean, I know what my mother went through starting at about age 85. And she could not do stairs up. So having when you say a split level, are you talking like a basement and a rambler? Because I do not see two levels as a detached unit.
We're not specifying how it's done. So someone, on a large lot like this, so 45,000 square feet, someone could put essentially a rambler style single story detached ADU in the back. On a smaller lot, maybe it makes more sense to do it as a split level. It depends on the desires of the person. If they're trying to provide for single level living more for a senior population, then they'll probably design it that way. If they're looking more because they want to rent it out, or it's for a younger family, maybe they'll do a split level, or do it across three and have a basement in it as well. We would leave it up to we would count the size of the dwelling spaces, leave it up to the resident to propose what they want to do and how to split that across. Now, of course, the numbers are always up to whatever the council wants to set those at.
I would like to just speak to the idea that what impact this is going to have in changing the nature of our city, Highland, staying Highland and all that. I know that Pleasant Grove did a DADU regulations 2 years ago. And as of 18 months, I haven't looked at the last 6 months, but in 18 months they had one applicant. One. So I think we can think and be fearful that everybody in Highland is going to do this. I think it's going to be limited in number. I know I talk about I want to have that, but on my particular lot, it's 1/3 of an acre, I could do it, but it just isn't configured right. I would have to put it in the side yard. And could I do it? Yes, but without having other access for a driveway, it just isn't feasible. I don't know that we just have a lot of people knocking down our door waiting for this so they can start building DADUs. I don't believe it's going to happen. It didn't happen in Farmington, and it's not happening in Pleasant Grove.
I have 3 people on my street who are waiting for this to pass. Whether they can, get it done in the next 2 years, but there's 3 of them on my street that are waiting for this to pass. So,
can I make a little comment, Ron? You lived close to where my grandparents' house is.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember yours. And
right.
The problem with Pleasant Grove, they don't need ADUs because they're building apartment buildings everywhere and townhouses. I mean, everywhere you look, they're building apartment buildings. They're building a double wing 5-story one down by doTERRA. It's like, I go to their planning commissions, I say, how many apartments are you building in the city? Oh, we got to do it, and it's different, yeah.
Well, and I subdivided and put a flag lot in Pleasant Grove. It was an orchard. So the name of the subdivision was Orchard Lane Subdivision. But Pleasant Grove is not Highland. Right. And I don't want Highland to become Pleasant Grove. Sure. But even with their DADU regulations, they had one applicant in 18 months. Now, the last 6 months, I can't speak to that. But I know in the first year and a half, it was just one DADU that was built.
What other, I think, conversation do we need to have? Doug, anything else? Because we haven't, I think, decided anything as far as this goes.
I do need to clarify one thing. Kim just texted me. Do you mind?
Oh, go ahead.
So on the, and I hope she's listening. So she texted me and she says, your house was 2258 square feet. And I said, no, the main floor was 1,158 square feet. The year before I moved to Highland, I finished the basement. So it ended up being 2258 square feet, 5 bedrooms, 3 baths. But the main floor was 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. I don't want you to think I'm being deceptive in any way with that, but that is an up and down basement. It was a rambler, up and basement level. Okay, just a clarification.
Yeah.
And I appreciate Kim bringing that.
I guess just trying to think about next steps. So I think you summed it up well, Mayor, that the big contention still is size and footprint, it seems like, right, as to what's left here. I'm trying to think, Rob, from a standpoint at this point, how to proceed, right? I mean, Rob can write some options for you, but I think they'd be varied at this point. We can have another work session to continue the conversation. We can bring it as an action item. There's options there, but I think this one's a complicated enough one. It would be nice to have a couple, right, to be writing to rather than multiple. And I don't know where, if Rob really feels confident in that yet.
And if I may, the other thing, we've mentioned it, I think, that the Planning Commission recommended, because they were applying the home setbacks, to also apply the home height regulations. I don't personally have a preference either way. It's just so you're aware, that is part of the proposal, that it is the home height regulations for these, which is 35 feet, rather than the accessory building, which are generally 25 feet of height.
It was a little more restrictive, if I remember correctly, that it was a maximum of 35 or the height of the primary building, whichever was smaller. Is that
correct? It's limited to both. So there's 2 restrictions the Planning Commission put in on both size and height, beyond just the numbers. So height is maximum height or as the home. So if your home's built to 30 feet, then the detached ADU building can only be 30 feet as well. And then for size, it was also that you couldn't exceed the footprint of the home as well. So if you had a smaller home on a lot, you couldn't build a massive home behind it on the lot either. You'd be limited to the same footprint.
And with regard to the multiple options that you were talking about, Aaron, it sounds to me like there is no interest in bringing footprint into it. So I think that eliminates, unless I'm misunderstanding
I thought that was
for
an
folks.
interesting idea.
I thought it's an interesting idea.
I did too. So there's 3 of us.
You'd have to explain it a little bit
I don't
deeper,
know.
maybe, but that.
Well, I'm.
Ignore what I said.
That's 1, 2, 3.
I was
You're
trying to
4.
count myself for a minute.
Okay.
Rob, is it allowed for us to put sprinklers in that small of a place? I mean, when they're that close together, is that something that the state will allow, or that,
Allow us to require?
yeah, on a new build, even though that's smaller?
I would have to double check. My inclination currently is no. Generally with fire codes and building codes, we're allowed to adopt what the state has, not necessarily to tweak it without going through a lengthy process. So when we adopted all those fire sprinkler rules, we were adopting existing fire code. We were just saying this also applies to Highland. We didn't necessarily tweak it, but I could double check that. I might be wrong on that, so I could explore that option for when we discuss this again.
Well, and one thing I didn't bring up, that I really am concerned when we, with a son as a policeman, and they deal with flag lots all the time, and I realize we're not talking about that, so please don't jump on me on that, but when you go behind a home, you don't know what you're walking into, and I would dare say that's true for a fireman. So if there's any way we can aid that, because if one catches fire, the other one's going to. That's just too close.
Let me ask this. Is is everybody okay with the setbacks and the height that were proposed, or is that something we need to revisit? Dr. Smith, what do you think?
I think they've done a lot of deliberation on the setbacks. I can support it. I like the 20-foot, I like the purple lines, let's put it that way. But height, I think we have to be careful with that. There are 35-foot high homes in Highland, the great big ones. I'm not sure it's a good look to have an accessory house next to it 35 feet high too. I don't know. I would probably say the accessory could be a little shorter, but that's just my personal opinion.
Well, can I ask what the reasoning was for the 35 feet? Trent? I'm sorry, you have to come up. I'm sorry. I know it's a long way.
If I remember correctly, we wanted to adopt it's a house, so we wanted it to apply to the same rules as a house.
Gotcha.
There's in there height restrictions. You can get closer, but you got to go lower.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So,
Chris?
Dr. Smith, you think lower?
I would lean towards lower. Let's see what Chris has to say.
Sure. You guys could sit on the front row.
Yeah, we should actually. We just wanted
They think
the
they're at
exercise.
church.
I'm a problem solver.
One on the back row, by the way. To kind of what Liz said right at the beginning, you understand this probably better than anybody in the city, that almost all decisions, it's not a binary thing. You look at it and go, well, I like 60% of this or 83% of it, and so am I going to say no because I don't like 11% of it, that type of thing? So a lot of our decisions hopefully are consensus, and I believe everybody on the Planning Commission is robust enough to voice their opinion quite stridently. I thought that I was just presenting the view of the Planning Commission in total, not necessarily devolving to, here's my personal opinion. There are some of us, and I will implicate myself in this, that would prefer smaller, lower, not fancy the idea of having the Taj Mahal 5 feet away from the poor neighbor's fence. But ultimately, it's your choice as a council to make that really tough decision. So in terms of height, as you know, I've done this development next door to us, and I've been a little horrified at what I thought. Another practical issue is building costs. I mean, if you can get away spending $300 a square foot, $300 a square foot. So if you do the math on a 1,000 square foot ADU, you are going to fork out $300 for it. So, but at least Jackie and Chris's, if I could put on our citizen hat, we would prefer lower, smaller, but we're a community of people that have different needs, and so as you hear from constituents, I would just get feedback from them. But the tough thing is the neighbor. It's a little awkward if you had a beautiful view of, one of these box elder, and now suddenly you look at a big building next to you.
35-story accessory building.
Yeah, it's big.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it was, I think, evident
35
from watching
foot,
the Planning Commission that it was a cooperative effort with some compromise. I don't know if anybody got 100% what they thought. Sorry, Dr. Smith, I interrupted you about the height because I was wondering.
No, I kind of lean towards what Chris just said, and I know it's all going to be a consensus, but I probably would keep the height of the accessory building down below 35 feet. But I guess it's going to be a relationship with what the structure is there. So if the home is 25 feet, you're not going to allow a 35-foot home or accessory building.
I will say, just from a practical standpoint, having where we can have a DADU in an accessory building, the DADU part can be up to 35 feet if the home is, but the rest of the accessory building that's not part of it has to be limited to 25 feet. There's a little bit of practical figuring out the plans and how to make that work. That'll be a little bit difficult. Always possible. Jason and I look at plans all day, so we'll figure out whatever that you want. It may be easier just from a review point of view to keep it just to the accessory building, so there's no question of this part of the structure is 25 feet and this part of it is 35 feet.
No, I think it needs to be consistent.
So let me ask, if you don't, are you done, Scott? Are you done?
I'm done, thank you.
So, if we have a detached garage that has capability of, I mean, it's tall, right? Because I'm leaning more towards the lower, but this is what I think is going to happen. You have a detached garage that's rather large, and I'm talking a very large detached garage, with enough space to put an apartment in the upstairs type thing, which I see as a very probable, I mean, it's like 700 or 800 square feet, is at least. Are we going to include something for that? Or, I mean, because I see that being taller. I don't mean to ask hard questions, but that's taller, and I'm leaning more towards lower. But if that detached garage is already there, are we going to allow something for structures that can be turned into a detached unit?
Yes, if I'm understanding kind of the question, essentially, you might have, I think you're very correct that we will have a lot of people who built existing detached structures, whether it's a detached garage or it's a pool house or it's something else. We have a lot of these detached structures, and they will want to convert some or all of it into these ADUs, these DADUs. That is required to be allowed under state law, so long as all of these other requirements we're talking about, size, setbacks, are met. I think practically, if, you know, assuming we keep the same home setbacks that has been proposed by the Planning Commission, if that gets adopted, I will have a lot of people who will want to convert and will not be able to, because they built their accessory buildings at the 10-foot accessory building setback, and I will tell them you cannot put a DADU in that unless they manage to somehow put it only at the 30-foot. I'm not sure how that would work, but I think a lot of those, the most questions I'm getting about DADUs are new builds. They're trying to design their homes and their lots anticipating to have a second access, because some homes already take up the majority of the space and there's no way to get a driveway to the back of it, and they practically can't put it something else in. But you would be allowing conversion of existing structures so long as they meet whatever regulations you set in this code.
So are we going to touch like the 3 families on one?
Yes.
I mean, we're.
Already, it was a great point, and I failed to bring it up. In the regulation, you get 1 ADU per lot. So whether that's attached or detached, you can only have 1. So as soon as you have 2 families living in your home, you can't have anyone living in a detached. If you have someone in your detached, you get 1 family in your main home. It's a very good point to raise.
What do we think? I mean, it is complicated. We probably do need more time to think about it. I guess I would be, is there any specific information that we need to know coming back, or is it just more time to think about it? I know Councilwoman Rice had the question about the sprinklers. What other questions do we have that would help?
Well, I think, may I?
Sure.
I may have to just repeat it. I mean, as Rob, I remember that when I attended. I'm sorry, I should have remembered that better. But I think we just need to have some kind of a section about already constructed units. As I look at some of the garages, the big garages that have been built, they're pretty close to the property line. So I don't know if, you know, the setbacks and all that would be able to pass, right? But I think we do need to readjust the height, take a look at that, and then lower the square footage or up the acreage on those square footage. That's the other stuff I can go with.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think those are valid points.
Could I propose maybe a process forward? We have until October 1st to adopt this. I'm hearing there's at least 2 potential big changes from what Planning Commission proposed. One was regarding height, the other was regarding size. And there was some discussion about spacing from the home and whether we want a different setback than the 6 feet. Is that something that a majority of council cares about?
I brought it up at one point. I don't care about that. The firewall is an excellent solution, in my opinion.
So it sounds like there's those two things and maybe a couple of other questions I need to do some research on, get back to you. Can I just bring up in the next council meeting one of these? We'll talk about height in the next one, get kind of a discussion just on that point.
You
and we'll
bet.
talk about size in the following one. So we narrow the scope a bit, and then following that, assuming we've no more questions, I can bring back the final ordinance.
Yeah, I think that's great, Robin. Let me just ask a question. So if we don't get this done by October 1st, because this is a monumental change, I think, in the city, whether people do it or not, and I can't imagine they won't, because, I just see there's pressure on that. But do we turn into pumpkins if we don't have it done by October 1st, or can we go another session, or are we going to get fined, or what happens?
No fines or anything. My worry would be we have enough sophisticated developers and home builders in Highland. If we don't have an ordinance in place, I would worry that we would have someone come in on October 1st and say, you haven't passed an ordinance, and so I'm going to build this and you can't say no to it because state law says you have to allow this in your city, and I'm going to meet all of the requirements of state law, and you don't have anything that tells me no. So I would, out of an abundance of caution, I would recommend getting this done by October 1st so we don't have something that we don't want.
Well, I just wondered if there was a state thing.
Yeah.
So
no-
in my
no
profession,
penalty.
I deal with insurance companies that tell us everything we can do now.
Yes.
They direct us. And so on a city level, it's either the state or developers.
Yep.
Okay,
Do-
okay.
Do we
so-
need to have a separate work session for this, Rob? Not attached to city council, since we love to pontificate, all of us?
It's up to the council. If there's just those two issues, it seems like we could tack those onto a council meeting and
I like the idea of adding them onto a council meeting.
At this point, our next couple of agendas aren't looking heavy. I mean, I say that knock on wood, who knows what's going to happen. But I think that's a doable thing. And I think just, sometimes we get in the habits of skipping communication items. This would be one that we wouldn't want to skip ultimately.
Right.
We're close. So we've got probably 4 council meetings, right? If we've got 2 in August, 2 in September, to make this happen. So we'll try to do so the August meetings would be communication, then we bring it back for action in the September meetings with the intent of having it finalized by the 2nd September meeting.
But that said, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
That said, we have an excellent framework
Yes.
from the Planning Commission who has spent hours on this, and I agree with 90% of it. We're talking about tweaking a couple things. I think there's no reason why we can't have it done by October 1st, because I certainly don't want to turn it into pumpkin.
And we can do whatever research we need to as council members before and re-listen to those planning commission meetings and maybe have conversations between us.
And October 1st may not be quite as hard of a deadline as we're thinking, because like you said, we already have the framework in place.
We got
We
the
could very
framework.
easily pick the most restrictive numbers we can come up with, plug them in, pass it, and come back and loosen it up later.
And readjust it if we need to.
And the state won't give us an extension at all.
Any other questions that you have for Rob?
Nope.
We have to stay longer because my
Nope.
daughter came all the way to give me a shake, and so I can't just go home right now.
You could always share it. I'm just kidding.
Okay, then I think with that, we can take a motion to adjourn, yes?
Make
So
that
moved.
motion.
Seconded.
No, that was Dr. Smith and Ron. But you guys, we'll see you all at the fling. It's so exciting, yes? Please
And-
act excited.
And noting the meeting this coming Monday.
Yes. Truth and Taxation
Remember,
Open House
the
on
budget's
Monday.
not quite done, so we've got 2 open houses coming up, and then the actual public hearing itself, August 11th. So we'll be seeing a lot of
So-
each other for the next few
And
weeks.
hey, before we leave, just so we're all clear, because somebody today asked a really good question. What are we allowed at the council booth? Is there anything off limits as far as the truth in taxation hearing that we can or should not talk about? Advocating, not advocating, it's fine because we haven't put it on them.
So our intention, we always have boards up at the booth. Our intention is to mostly make them about that this year, just because I think that's going to be the main topics of discussion. But it's not on the ballot, so feel free to advocate whatever you would like and answer all the questions and all of that.
Okay. And how are we going to arrange
Wish me a happy
coverage?
birthday.